I died, just moments before conquering the continent of Calradia. I transmigrated, becoming the most wretched and ugliest goblin in another world. But the mountain blade system that killed me came with me. While my fellow goblins are still eating raw meat and cannibalizing each other, I, with my human soul and the M&B system, have already started forging, fighting, and recruiting my very first soldier. From this day on, a goblin will raise his own banner in this forest swarming with monsters. In the demon forest, within a goblin tribe that resembled a garbage dump, hundreds of ugly goblins, less than half the height of a normal person, greedily surrounded a freshly caught wild boar, gulping down saliva. But the tall figure feasting by the boar, the tribe's chief, kept them at bay. After the chief had eaten his fill and lumbered off to his thatched hut, his snores signaled the start of the real feast. The goblins swarmed, tearing the remaining half of the boar to shreds. Once satiated, the adult goblins scattered to sleep. Only then did the goblin cubs dare to crawl out from various corners to greedily lick the blood mixed with mud. This won't do. I have to find another way out. A goblin cub thought fiercely as he watched his kin gnawing on dirt. His name was Li Chen. A week ago, he was a mountain blade player on the verge of conquering Calradia before he died from exhaustion. He transmigrated and became a goblin, the lowest of all monsters. Just as he was about to give up and start over, the mountain blade system that had caused his death followed him, granting him 3 attribute points to start. Li Chen, on the verge of death, was jolted back to life. He immediately put all 3 points into vigor. These life-saving points allowed him to survive the toughest cub period by eating grass. 14 days. A goblin's growth cycle is extremely short. He was almost an adult, capable of walking upright. He looked at the cleanly gnawed boar skeleton, his mind racing. He picked up a stone, knocked out 4 tusks, and planned to fashion them into daggers or a spear. As he was planning, a sharp pang of hunger almost made him faint. I need to eat some grass, make a weapon, then go hunting. Just as he was about to leave, his eyes fell on the intact leg bone. Marrow! There was marrow inside. He laboriously broke the joint with a stone and dragged the heavy leg bone into the forest. He didn't dare to start a fire in the tribe, fearing the chief would discover the secret of the marrow. He didn't know that several other hungry goblin cubs were quietly following him. In a small valley, Li Chen used the knowledge he'd learned from Bear Grylls to quickly make a fire drill. Smithing proficiency +1. Ha! Li Chen was surprised to find that even making such a small tool increased his smithing proficiency. He checked his skill tree and saw that he could eventually learn to forge mithril and enchant weapons. The system had adapted. I swear, from this day on, I will never eat grass again. He put the leg bone on the fire. Soon, the aroma of roasting protein filled the air, nearly driving the carnivore who had been eating grass for half a month insane. He crafted a crude spear by tying a sharpened tusk to a stick. You have forged a shoddy spear. Smithing proficiency +1. When the bone was ready, he smashed it open and ravenously sucked out the hot marrow. The rush of fat and nutrients made him almost pass out from pleasure. Ah, I am a carnivore. Just as he was savoring this long-overdue delicacy, he heard the snap of a twig. He looked up to see 8 half-grown goblins surrounding him, their green eyes fixed on the bone in his hand. Grass eater, give us what you're holding, the strongest of the cubs demanded. Li Chen's brow furrowed. He knew he couldn't escape. His mind raced, and he made a decision. All right, you can have it, he said with a grin, tossing the remaining bone in front of them. The goblin's reason was instantly overwhelmed by the scent, and they scrambled for the bone. Now was his chance. Li Chen, stone in one hand and spear in the other, charged into the fray like a tiger. He accurately brained one goblin with the stone and ruthlessly stabbed another in the abdomen. Arg! The piercing screams finally alerted the other goblins. Li Chen, having succeeded, quickly retreated to create distance. On the field, 4 were down, 4 were left standing. You have killed a goblin cub. Experience +1. You have killed a goblin cub. Experience +1. You have killed a goblin cub. Experience +1. So killing really gives EXP. Li Chen saw his 3-7 experience bar and a cruel smile formed on his face. For more, and he would level up. My dear goblin brothers, there's no need for us to fight to the death, he said, trying to confuse them while looking for an opening. Kill him. We'll split the food. The lead goblin didn't fall for it and led the charge. The chief, how did you get here? Li Chen suddenly pointed behind them, shouting in terror. The fear of the chief was ingrained in their bones. All the goblins subconsciously turned around. Damn it! The lead goblin realized he'd been tricked, but it was too late. Li Chen's spear had already plunged into his stomach. The remaining goblins, terrified and enraged, threw their stones at Li Chen. He took a few hits, twisted his spear viciously, and finally brought down the leader. But in the fierce struggle, his spearhead broke off. Seeing this, the last 2 goblins lost their nerve and fled. I can't let them go back. Li Chen knew that if his ability to make fire was exposed, he would be dead for sure. He forced himself up, finished the remaining marrow to regain some strength, and chased after them with a sharpened tusk. As expected, not far away, he found the two goblins collapsed on the ground from exhaustion. He mercilessly finished them off. You have killed a goblin cub. Experience +1. Level 01. Attribute point +1. Proficiency point +1. The power of leveling up dispelled his dizziness. He put the attribute point into vigor and the proficiency point into running. Survival first. He returned to the battlefield and tied up the one goblin he had knocked unconscious. You are victorious. Enemy captured. 1. Loot gained, grain x2, dinars, 23. It even drops items and money. Li Chen was overjoyed. He opened his party screen and looked at the captured goblin cub with a kind smile. After a round of failed persuasion followed by a loving beatdown, he finally got the terrified cub to submit. Recruit one goblin cub for 5 dinars? Yes. He had recruited his first soldier in this world. From now on, your name is Gabumo, Goblin Spear. Li Chen taught him how to reinforce a spear with resin, and Gabumo learned quickly. With a soldier and a weapon, Li Chen's ambitions grew. He led Gabumo to a river to fish, making fish traps and storing the cooked fish in his system inventory, which also boosted his army's morale. However, the smell of fish attracted a more powerful predator, 3-meter-long, horned crocodiles. Seeing their massive jaws that could crush a fish trap in one bite, Li Chen grabbed the petrified Gabumo and ran for his life. He noticed the crocodiles were slow on land and immediately began to formulate a new plan. They returned to the tribe to find it in chaos. A large number of goblins were on the ground, groaning in agony and foaming at the mouth, mass food poisoning from eating some unknown red berries. Li Chen's eyes lit up as he looked at the field of 6 soldiers. He dragged a lightly poisoned adult goblin to the back mountain and used his modern knowledge to induce vomiting, curing him. Acknowledge me as your leader, and I'll stop your stomach from hurting. Recruit one goblin for 10 dinars? Yes. Another soldier acquired. Although the system showed him as wounded, Li Chen knew that in the M&B system, as long as they weren't dead, they would recover after resting. Looking at the field of moaning, incapacitated goblins, a meaningful arc formed on Li Chen's lips. The great revival of the goblins would begin with recruiting this army of poison remnants. On the second day, as dawn broke, Li Chen got up to check on the poison goblin's condition. He first opened the soldier management interface and saw that the troop strength had recovered to 4, and the injured poison goblin had regained its health. In reality, that guy was the same. After being nudged awake by Li Chen, he was bouncing around full of energy with no signs of poisoning. In contrast, the 30 or so goblins from his hunting team who had eaten the red poison fruit were all dead, with none surviving. Li Chen said to the poison goblin, "From now on, you will be called Gobude. Take me to where you pick the poison fruits." The 4 of them sneaked out of the goblin tribe without attracting anyone's attention. Li Chen first grabbed a spear from the bushes, and then Gobude led the way towards the west side of the tribe. After walking for a short while, Li Chen called a halt to the group and took out some roasted fish from the storage to share with everyone. The newly joined supplies and Gobude looked surprised. It was the first time they had seen a goblin able to conjure items out of thin air. After their astonishment, their attention was quickly drawn to the roasted fish, and they began to devour it ravenously. From now on, you are not allowed to eat anything without my permission. This is an order. Anyone who disobeys will be fed to my big belly. Li Chen threatened. He was afraid that the food poisoning incident from yesterday would happen again. He didn't care if others lived or died, but his soldiers couldn't have any issues. Right now, he had not a single dinar left on him, making it impossible to recruit a full team. If there were any unexpected casualties, he would be devastated. The main task now was to hunt monsters and earn dinars. If they couldn't hunt wild monsters today, he wouldn't have money to pay the troops, and their morale would plummet quickly, leading to the 3 of them leaving the team. At that point, without the system's constraints, the 3 might spill his secrets, and he absolutely could not allow that to happen. After finishing their meal, Li Chen urged Gobude to lead the way, and they quickly arrived at the spot where the hunting team had picked wild fruits yesterday. "Boss, look, that red one is the poison fruit." Gobude pointed at a small bush, trembling all over. Just seeing the red fruit made his stomach ache. Li Chen saw that the small bush was laden with many red fruits. They looked like strawberries, but the surface was very smooth and extremely red, almost unnaturally so. Such eye-catching fruits, yet no small animals were nibbling on them, indicating their strong toxicity. Li Chen made a storage box out of large leaves and filled it with red poison fruits. Then he led the group quickly north to the place where they had encountered the horned crocodile yesterday. He ordered Gobu Chang, "Do you remember how to make a fish basket? Let the supplies and Gobu help you, and immediately make a few fish baskets, then go catch fish by the river." Gobu Chang was so scared that his hair stood on end. "Boss, there's a horned crocodile by the river. I don't dare to go near." Li Chen looked at him coldly and raised his right hand in a threatening manner. Seeing this, Gobo Chang immediately stood at attention. Boss, I guarantee I will complete the task. Then Gobo Chang took the two guys to find materials for making fish baskets. After the three left, Li Chen first gathered dry branches and leaves to start a fire, then found two straight sticks and used the remaining two wild boar tusks to make two spears. Once he dried the resin on the spears over the campfire, Gobo Chang came running back like a madman, holding a large fish he had just caught. Well done. Eat something and take a break. Don't mess up when we start fighting later. Li Chen took the live fish and pulled out a unit of roasted fish from storage to share with the three. When the three saw they could eat roasted fish again, they cheered and began to eat, not even noticing what he meant by his last sentence. Li Chen used his nails to open the fish's belly, removing all the internal organs, then stuffed a handful of red poison fruits into the fish's belly and pressed down hard, squeezing out all the juice from the red poison fruits. There were still many red poison fruits left, so he used a stone to mash half of them into a paste and coated the outside of the fish with it. Then he also smeared the tips of the 4 spears with the red poison fruit paste. Having completed all this, the 3 goblins were full. Li Chen held a long spear in his right hand and a vine in his left, on which hung a poisoned fish. Full now? If you're full, follow me. He strode towards the riverbank. The goblins seemed to understand his intentions, their faces pale, but the other 2 had already followed him, leaving him no choice but to go alone. Li Chen arrived at the tributary of the river where he had encountered the horned crocodile yesterday. From a distance, he spotted several horned crocodiles basking lazily in the sun on the riverbank. He picked out a solitary horned crocodile and crept closer. When they were about 20 meters apart, the leisurely crocodile became alert, its bright red eyes fixed on Li Chen. Li Chen picked up a stone and threw it at the horned crocodile, the stone hitting its thick, horned back. The horned crocodile was enraged, opening its massive jaws and letting out a hiss before launching itself forward. Wah wah! The goblins screamed in fright and turned to run. Stop! Form up! Li Chen commanded, instantly, freezing the goblins in place. Now in combat mode, Li Chen could forcibly control the soldiers' actions through commands. The 3 goblins were terrified, yet they stood there, ground, trembling as the horned crocodile charged at them like a low-profile tank, causing them to scream in panic. Li Chen remained unfazed. The horned crocodile would only charge a short distance before entering a slow crawl mode. Sure enough, the crocodile dashed forward for less than 10 meters before it began to wobble and crawl. Li Chen felt it was time and said to the goblins, maintain formation, slowly back away. He kept the formation about 10 meters from the horned crocodile and led the group in a slow retreat. In fact, he could have lured the horned crocodile by himself, but he brought the 3 goblins along to test the control of the cavalry system over soldiers and to toughen up their nerves. As the 4 of them slowly retreated, the 3 goblins were nearly in tears, howling and sniffling, yet their bodies remained steady, holding their spears, looking as bizarre as could be. Li Chen was speechless. Was it really necessary to be this scared? Before long, the horned crocodile was led about 100 meters away from the riverbank. Li Chen felt it was enough. If he continued to tease the crocodile, it would escape. He threw the poisoned fish he had been holding. The horned crocodile, having lost its patience, thought it could no longer catch the little green creatures and was about to give up and return to its familiar spot on the bank to bask in the sun. But before it could turn around, it saw something bloody thrown in front of it. The horned crocodile looked down and saw its favorite fish. Although the fish smelled strange, a fish was still a fish, and fish were edible. It gulped down the fish in one bite, its bright red eyes fixed on Li Chen, as if asking, is there more? Bring me more. Li Chen also widened his eyes, staring at the horned crocodile, unsure if the red poison fruit would affect this amphibious creature. The 2 creatures stared at each other for a while. The horned crocodile confirmed that the little green creature would not feed it anymore, and it let out a series of heavy breaths, seemingly dissatisfied, before turning to leave. Li Chen felt a bit disappointed. The red poison fruit seemed ineffective against the horned crocodile. According to Goblin Da's description, once the red poison fruit was ingested, it would almost immediately cause excruciating pain, as if the intestines were being torn apart. But this horned crocodile had eaten the red poison fruit for a while now, and nothing unusual had happened. Li Chen gave up on hunting the horned crocodile. He wouldn't resort to tricks. He couldn't hunt creatures of this level. The cavalry system indicated it was a level 3 creature, while the cavalry units were level 6. Level 3 was already quite formidable, far beyond what they, mere potatoes and rotten eggs, could handle. Just as he was about to call off the operation, suddenly, the turning horned crocodile abruptly stopped in its tracks, as if time had been paused, remaining completely still until something broke through the critical point. The horned crocodile suddenly opened its massive mouth and let out a hiss, then wildly swung its tail and head, its 4 short legs digging into the ground as if it were experiencing immense pain, spinning around like a little top. Useful. Li Chen was overjoyed, brandishing his spear as he approached, intending to find an opportunity to take down this horned crocodile. Li Chen didn't charge directly. He didn't want to court death. Instead, he held his spear and stayed at the edge. The horned Crocodile, in extreme pain from the poison, instinctively reacted when it saw the little green creature still swaying in front of it, curling its body and retracting its tail, then whipping it out like a whip. Li Chen focused intently on the horned crocodile's movements and, seeing it curl its tail in a poised manner, quickly jumped aside. With a loud crack, the horned crocodile swung its tail fiercely, striking a large tree and leaving an imprint on the trunk. With such force, if it hit a person, it would surely break bones and tear muscles. Li Chen felt no fear. Instead, he was even more excited. The stronger the enemy, the more experience gained from killing it. This guy was so powerful. Killing it might just allow him to level up directly. He began to harass the horned crocodile more frequently, throwing stones, tossing branches, and shouting loudly. After all, the horned crocodile was a wild beast, and anyone who has raised reptiles knows that these creatures are easily stressed. Li Chen's actions indeed provoked it, as it occasionally stopped to open its massive mouth at Li Chen, issuing threatening hisses. However, as time passed, the pain in its abdomen reached a certain threshold and it could no longer endure it. It stopped paying attention to Li Chen's harassment and frantically tried to run towards the riverbank. Wild animals behave this way when they are injured or frightened. They instinctively want to flee to familiar areas. The horned crocodile focused on escaping, but Li Chen was anxious. He wanted to deliver the finishing blow to this horned crocodile to maximize the experience gained. If it returned to the river and swam out of the battlefield range determined by the system, it would be considered out of combat. And even if it died from the poison, it would have nothing to do with him. It couldn't escape. It had to be killed on the shore. Li Chen made up his mind and ordered 3 goblins to run in front of the horned crocodile. Of course, he didn't want them to risk their lives. All 4 of them attacking together would be suicide. He just wanted everyone to make some noise to see if they could scare the horned crocodile. Everyone, shout, throw stones at it, scare it. After giving the order, Li Chen started to yell, picking up dry branches and stones from the ground to throw at the horned crocodile, and the other 3 followed suit. The scene became quite chaotic, resembling wild men hunting in the mountains. However, the horned crocodile was not scared at all. It was in so much pain that it just wanted to return to the familiar river, crawling straight ahead. Li Chen quickly ordered everyone to disperse. There could be no casualties. But what should they do now? If the horned crocodile continued to crawl towards the riverbank, it would escape. Li Chen felt a bit flustered, quickly turning his mind to think of a solution, and he actually came up with one. He took some grass rope from the warehouse and made a lasso, carefully approaching the horned crocodile from the side and throwing the lasso at its head. He threw it 3 times without success, then adjusted the lasso to make it larger and carefully observed the horned crocodile's crawling posture to aim. Upon closer inspection, he noticed that blood was actually dripping from the corner of the horned crocodile's mouth, flowing steadily. Li Chen was taken aback. Was the red poison this potent? It made such a large beast cough up blood. He seized the opportunity to throw the lasso, and this time it hit the horned crocodile's head, catching around its plump neck as it crawled. Li Chen was overjoyed, tugging on the rope and running to a large tree, circling it twice to tie the rope around the tree and knotting it before jumping back to a safe distance to observe. This grass rope was not very sturdy. It was about the thickness of an adult's finger, and using it to tie up a creature of this size was quite risky. If the creature struggled desperately, it might break free, but this was his last resort. If it didn't work, he would have to accept defeat. After the horned crocodile was tied up with grass ropes, it struggled to crawl forward a few steps, pulling the grass rope taut. Li Chen took a deep breath and waited for a while. The grass rope didn't break, but instead, the horned crocodile seemed to lose its spirit and collapsed. The red poison fruit it had consumed had fully taken effect, severely damaging its internal organs. The fact that it still had the strength to crawl was a testament to the horned crocodile's vitality. The exhausted horned crocodile struggled to move forward, swinging its tail and shaking its head, but it was all in vain. The grass rope, which it could easily snap with a little effort in normal times, now felt as if it were a binding rope of the gods, firmly locking its neck and preventing it from advancing even an inch. Time passed second by second. 5 minutes in, the horned crocodile struggled occasionally. At 10 minutes, it began to convulse violently, gasping for breath. Half an hour later, the horned crocodile lay still on the ground like a dead dog. If not for the blood frothing from its nostrils, it would have seemed lifeless. Li Chen felt he could wait no longer. If he did, the creature would die from the poison, and he wouldn't be able to deliver the critical blow to absorb the maximum experience. However, to prevent the horned crocodile from playing dead and launching a surprise attack, Li Chen didn't approach directly. He said to the expendable, "You, get on its back." The expendable was so scared he nearly wet himself and refused to follow the order. Li Chen raised his hand and gave him a few hard slaps. The expendable cried out in pain but still didn't dare to climb up. Li Chen cursed under his breath and directly opened the battlefield command interface of Mountain Blade, creating a separate infantry group for the expendable, then dragged the command flag and planted it on the horned crocodile's back. The expendable, who had already been trembling, suddenly moved. He was drawn by a mysterious force and, disregarding everything, walked onto the horned crocodile's back. Standing there, When the expendable came to his senses, he realized he had somehow ended up on the horned crocodile's back. Wow! The expendable urinated in fear, his soul nearly leaving his body, but he stood there for quite a while and the horned crocodile made no move. Seeing that the horned crocodile was still inactive, Li Chen knew it was completely out of energy and felt relieved. He ordered the expendable to get down and stepped up himself. He stepped on the horned crocodile's forehead. From behind, in this position, if the horned crocodile went wild, he would only be thrown off without any harm. Time to hit the road. Li Chen gripped his spear and thrust it fiercely into the horned crocodile's eye, the entire spear tip piercing into its head. The horned crocodile trembled all over, shook for a while, then suddenly went limp and finally died. The system notification sounded. You have achieved victory. Enemies killed, 1 enemies captured, 0 experience gained, 30 friendly casualties, 0 loot obtained. Grains x2, monster meat x5, horned crocodile skin x1. Dinars gained, 90 level, 1-2 experience, 10 40th attribute points plus 1, specialization points plus 1. Finally, that was so damn exhausting. Li Chen shook the blood off his spear. After all that effort, he had finally killed the horned crocodile, and it was all worth it. Just killing 1 horned crocodile had leveled him up and earned him 90 dinars, bringing his finances above the safety line. Li Chen eagerly opened the attribute panel and added the attribute point to vitality, raising it from 4 to 5. At the same time, his body underwent a change, his height rapidly growing to 1.3 meters, reaching the level of an adult goblin. As for the remaining specialization point, he directly allocated it to running, increasing his running skill to 2/5. It would max out at 5 specialization points. Next, Li Chen checked the loot. 2 units of grains x2, which drop from any monster. Monster meat x5, marked by the system as meat infused with magical power. Long-term consumption can increase the amount of magic power in the body, making one stronger. Horned crocodile leather x1, a complete piece of horned crocodile skin, with the system describing the back leather as very tough, capable of resisting sword attacks, while the belly leather is softer and can be used to make linings. The armor made from horned crocodile skin not only resists physical attacks but also offers slight protection against magical attacks, making it a better armor material than steel. Li Chen's eyes lit up. Armor material. What a good thing. Right now, he was completely bare, with only a hand-woven grass skirt covering him, which was no different from being naked and made him feel very insecure. Without a full set of armor, he couldn't heal properly. Putting away the warehouse management page, Li Chen looked at the horned crocodile corpse on the ground. There was still a piece of skin on it. The monster slaying system dropped 1, and in reality, he could also skin 1. This was too profitable. If he farmed a few more times, he could assemble a heavy infantry unit. However, Li Chen didn't even have a proper knife in hand, let alone making armor. He couldn't even skin the dead horned crocodile. What a pity, it can only go to waste. Li Chen shook his head at the horned crocodile corpse. This thing could only sit here and rot. If he had a few big goblins in his troop, they could flip it over together, and then he could use wild boar tusks to process the softer belly of the horned crocodile. Speaking of big goblins, they were an upgraded variety of goblins. The upgrade path for goblins is Goblin. Pup level 0, Goblin level 1, Big Goblin level 2. After upgrading to a big goblin, the goblin undergoes a transformation, reaching a height of 1.6 to 1.8 meters, similar to an ordinary person. However, because they are magical creatures, their internal magical energy concentration is relatively high, and big goblins are generally stronger than adult human males. Thinking of upgrades, Li Chen opened the troop management page and found that there were already soldiers ready to upgrade. He directly spent 5 dinars to upgrade a pup goblin to a goblin. In the next moment, the goblin spear, which had been poking the horned crocodile, let out a gasp, and then his body quickly changed, growing taller and stronger. After a while, his height reached 1.2 meters. I've grown taller. I've grown stronger, the goblin spear shouted excitedly, comparing his height with the big goblin. However, once they grow into adult goblins, they gain human rights and can no longer be casually killed like pups. It would require the chief to do so. Now, all 3 members of Li Chen's team were goblins, with only the material still in the pup stage. The material looked at the others, all taller than him, with envy in his eyes. Li Chen patted his shoulder and encouraged him. From now on, you must obey my orders and not be so timid. Timid goblins don't grow tall. After saying that, he sent the goblin spear to catch a few more fish. He needed to continue grinding for experience. Over the next few hours, Li Chen used the same method to take down 7 more horned crocodiles, leveling up 3 times to reach level 6. He allocated all his attribute points to vitality, increasing his vitality from 5 to 8, and his height reached 1.4 meters, looking somewhat human-like, similar to a young human boy. His dinar count accumulated to 710, which would be enough to maintain the troop for a long time without doing anything else. Additionally, the material harvest was very rich, with 8 pieces of horned crocodile skin, 3 horned crocodile horns, and 2 horned crocodile tendons lying in the warehouse. The horns of the horned crocodile were very short, about the length of an ordinary person's thumb. The system entry stated that this item was used by horned crocodiles to detect the flow of water magic. In rivers, a unique organ developed by creatures from another world. The system entry also mentioned that this item could be used in medicine and was a very good magical material. Items related to magic are definitely valuable, so Li Chen let them rest securely in the warehouse, as they should be useful in the future. As for the two-horned crocodile tendons, that was very interesting. They were natural strings that could be used to make bows. However, the bow body was a big problem. They currently couldn't find a material that was both strong and elastic. Even if they found one, they didn't have suitable tools to process it. They could only randomly find a sturdy and straight wooden stick to serve as the bow body. Li Chen instructed the goblins to scatter and search for sticks. After a while, each goblin returned with several straight sticks. Li Chen selected two that were the most sturdy and flexible, using his sharp nails to carve grooves on both ends of the sticks. With all this added vitality, he not only grew taller, but his nails also elongated and sharpened, barely usable as blades. After carving the grooves, he tied the sinew to the two grooves, creating two extremely rudimentary wooden bows. Li Chen tried pulling the bowstring and found it satisfactory. Once drawn, it provided elasticity, but he couldn't pull it too far, or the bow would break. He set the bow down and told the goblins, "Next, go find branches. They need to be this thin and straight." Li Chen gestured to indicate the thickness, and the goblins scattered again, soon returning with a handful of branches. He chose the most suitable one, using his sharp nails to strip the bark off. He lit a bundle of firewood and placed the peeled branch by the fire to roast. This was to dry out the moisture in the branch. During the dehydration process, the branch would warp, but as long as he kept adjusting its position, it would become straighter and straighter. Before long, Li Chen had a small stick that was of moderate thickness and length and very straight. But that wasn't the end. He then placed the tip of the stick in the fire, and once it was charred black, he ground the tip against a stone, repeating the burning and grinding 2 or 3 times until he had a very rudimentary arrow. Li Chen was very focused while doing all this, not noticing that 3 goblins were staring intently at his actions, their eyes filled with curiosity and eagerness to learn. After completing a series of tasks, he stood up, knocked the arrow onto the bow, drew it back, and released. The arrow was successfully shot 20 meters away. The 3 goblins' eyes widened, and they began jumping and shouting, "Oh, oh, oh! Wow! 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 Arrow! Arrow! Arrow!" Li Chen's face darkened. Damn, these 3 idiots. He walked over to the landing spot and pulled the arrow out of the ground. With this range and penetration power, he could only say it was utterly disappointing. But at the start-up phase of entrepreneurship, the troops could gain precious ranged power, which was already a very good condition. What more could he ask for? And wasn't there also the red poison fruit, this super poison? If the power wasn't enough, he could always enchant it. When the time came, just applying a bit of poison juice to each arrowhead would make it lethal upon contact. Li Chen set down the bow and arrow, giving orders to the 3 goblins. "Using the method I just showed you, each of you make 20 arrows. Go quickly. If you finish, there will be meat to eat." Upon hearing there would be meat, the 3 became highly motivated, quickly searching for materials around them, then squatting by the fire to strip bark and roast arrowheads, busy as bees. Li Chen didn't idle either. He made 2 rudimentary quivers from vines to store the wooden arrows. By the time he finished, the 3 had yet to complete their work. He took out a 5-kilogram unit of beast meat from the warehouse, cutting it into strips with his nails, then skewering them with sticks. Li Chen wiped the grease off his hands, thinking how unbearable life was without tools. He had to find a way to get some knives, or else production in daily life would be impossible. He was truly fed up with this primitive existence. He placed the meat skewers by the fire to roast, and perhaps due to the beast meat, the rich aroma wafted out even without any seasoning. The 3 goblins couldn't help but swallow, but they knew that Li Chen wouldn't allow them to eat until they finished their work, so they quickened their pace. Li Chen was very satisfied with their performance today and planned to let them eat their fill once they completed their tasks, but an unexpected visitor approached. Suddenly, a crack sounded from the bushes in the distance, and Li Chen's long ears perked up. "Everyone up! Grab your weapons!" Li Chen shouted, picking up his bow and arrow. The 3 guys were puzzled, but seeing Li Chen so serious, they all stood up, picked up their spears, and lined up beside him. The 4 thought a beast had wandered nearby, their eyes fixed on the bushes. The atmosphere tense. Li Chen slowly drew his bow, the arrowhead coated with red poison aimed at the bushes not far away. Under the watchful eyes of the others, the bushes rustled, and all 4 tightened their grips on their weapons. In the next moment, a green head popped out from the bushes. It was a goblin. The 4 let out a collective sigh of relief. It turned out to be a goblin from a nearby tribe. What a scare! The goblin in the bushes, seeing 4 of its kind, was also a bit surprised, thinking to itself, why were they not lying in the tribe but out here? If it weren't for being sent on a hunting mission by the chief, it wouldn't have come out. Suddenly, it spotted the skewers of roasted meat by the campfire, and smelling the aroma in the air, its eyes instantly turned green as it jumped out of the bushes and dashed towards the roast. At that moment, it only had eyes for the meat, completely ignoring the other 4 goblins. Li Chen saw this guy charging like a hungry dog and kicked him back, sending him tumbling to the ground. "Now, Standing at 1.4 meters tall, Li Chen was much stronger than an ordinary goblin, and this kick knocked the goblin down, leaving it groaning and unable to get up. Li Chen wanted to ask how it ended up here, but then more rustling came from the bushes, and a whole bunch of goblins emerged, numbering over 20, quickly filling the area. Seeing so many of them, Li Chen's heart tightened, and he took a few steps back to stand with his 3 soldiers, his gaze warily fixed on these creatures. The newly arrived goblins all spotted the roasted meat by the campfire, their faces showing greed. A goblin with a huge scar on its face stepped forward, fixated on the roast, licking its lips. It was the leader of this hunting team, and the scar on its face was from a wolf bite during a hunt. Not many goblins survived a wolf's jaws, which added to its experience and earned it the title of leader, along with the nickname Scarface. It pulled its gaze away from the roast and looked warily at Li Chen. Normally, it would have led its team to snatch the meat, but Li Chen's height was an issue. Aside from the chief, no goblin in the tribe was this tall. The two sides eyed each other warily for a long time while the roast by the campfire reached the most delicious state, the fat sizzling as it dripped into the coals. Scarface's mouth watered uncontrollably. Having never eaten fine food, its rationality evaporated, and its beastly instincts took over. It no longer cared why Li Chen was so tall and threatened. "Give me the roast, or I'll kill you," Li Chen thought to himself. Typical goblin, so straightforward. He wasn't angry. Instead, he smiled and said, "Sure, that's fine, but how about you all become my little brothers?" Upon hearing the agreement, Scarface thought the big guy was really weak, but the latter part of the statement was a bit confusing. What did he mean by wanting to take over? Scarface got angry, pointing at Li Chen and cursing, "Big guy, if you don't want to suffer, just behave and listen. Don't think being tall is impressive. I have more people than you." "Is that so?" Li Chen showed a playful expression, looking at the other goblins, smiling as he said, "Brothers, how about you recognize me as your boss? I'm taller and stronger than Scarface. I can catch more and bigger prey." He pointed at the roast on the campfire. "If you become my little brothers, you'll get to eat your fill every day. Those who agree now can go eat the roast immediately." Ding! "Would you like to spend 210 dinars to recruit goblins times 21? You can recruit 16. Li Chen counted. There were 22 on the opposite side, with one not agreeing to be recruited, which seemed to be Scarface. This guy probably didn't want to give up his position as the leader of the hunting team, so he didn't agree to the recruitment. Goblins, as greedy creatures, also coveted power. Li Chen chose to confirm, paid, and recruited 16 goblins, bringing his troop strength directly to 20/20ths. The scarred face was furious to see that Li Chen dared to undermine him, break his bones. With a roar from the scarred face, the scene of more than 20 goblins rushing forward did not occur, as most had been recruited by Li Chen. Only 4 unrecruited goblins foolishly charged ahead. A few unfortunate ones thought everyone would rush together and didn't even look back. When they reached Li Chen's team, they were immediately taken down by 4 long spears. As they clutched their wounds and howled, they realized that the main force was still standing in place, and only they had rushed forward to be picked off. The scarred face, seeing so many not charging, became even angrier and bellowed, "Get in there, all of you!" His subordinates exchanged glances, then all walked towards Li Chen. The scarred face thought his roar had worked, but to his surprise, these goblins stood beside Li Chen, without attacking, appearing very cooperative. The scarred face was dumbfounded. What was going on? A rebellion? But why? Li Chen laughed heartily and waved his hand. "Go! Beat him!" In a rush, 19 goblins charged forward and began to pummel the scarred face, who screamed in agony and soon fell to the ground. After he fell, the remaining goblins surrounded him and kicked him, making him roll over and over. Li Chen felt it was enough and called for everyone to stop, then walked over to step on the now pig-headed scarred face, raising his spear to deliver a finishing blow for experience points. The scarred face spat out a mouthful of blood mixed with broken teeth and mumbled, You can't kill me. I'm the leader of the hunting team." Li Chen scoffed and thrust the spear down hard. The scarred face's eyes bulged as he felt his strength rapidly draining away. He never expected to die so easily. Feeling both fear and resentment in his heart, he issued his final curse at Li Chen. You've grown so tall, you must be becoming a big goblin. The leader won't allow you to grow like this. You will die too. You will die," he screamed hysterically, and Li Chen frowned, pulling out the spear and stabbing down again, several times in succession, until the scarred face breathed his last and the system notified him of increased experience points. Li Chen shook off the blood from the spear and pondered the scarred face's last words. The leader wouldn't allow him to become a big goblin, meaning there had been goblins who grew into big goblins in the past but were killed by the leader during their growth? It made sense. This goblin tribe had over 300 adult goblins, but only one big goblin leader, which was a very low ratio. If there were human factors involved, it would be much more reasonable. It was also normal to think that goblins were inherently greedy creatures. If 365 bones had 366 rebellious ones, if a tribe had a goblin successfully grow into a big goblin, the first thing they would do is challenge the leader and kill them to take their place. The fat leader, in order to maintain his position, would immediately crush any goblin that showed abnormal height. Li Chen thought this was very goblin-like, but wouldn't this suppress the tribe's development? This dead fat man killed all the potentially strong goblins, and with the goblin tribe's quality remaining so low, how could they expand their territory? Well, that dead fat man never thought about development. During the half-month Li Chen was grazing, the leader either ate or slept, never stepping out of the tribe. The goblins were all as thin as skeletons, while he alone had grown into a tall figure. If it weren't for the weak goblins instinctively gathering around the strong, the tribe would have fallen apart long ago. Now, with Li Chen's height at 1.4 meters, he stood out prominently among the goblin crowd, which generally ranged from 1 to 1.2 meters. As long as he appeared before the leader would definitely kill him. But Li Chen looked at his 19 subordinates and smiled confidently. I have 19 death warriors, what can you, a big goblin, do to win? Li Chen had gathered the ragged-faced troops, and their numbers had reached a peak. He planned to take them back tonight for a fight before the leader could kill him. 2. Boost the morale of the new recruits. The first meal had to be something good. He took out 2 units of beast meat, tore it into strips, and roasted it by the campfire. Once cooked, he took out a bag of grains and wrapped the roasted meat around the grains to distribute to the goblins. The carbohydrates from the grains provided ample energy. Eating this filled their stomachs, but the taste was poor, and the goblins didn't like it. Fortunately, wrapping it in roasted meat made it acceptable. After the troops were full, Li Chen had each of them find a long, straight stick, instructing them to roast the end in the campfire until it carbonized, then sharpen the tip with stones to make wooden spears. He handed the bag of grains to Gobu to go pick some red poison fruits and fill this bag. Gobu took the order and ran off. Li Chen found a newly recruited goblin with slightly broader shoulders and longer arms and gave him the other Bao. From now on, you will be called Gobu Bao. Pay attention, I will teach you how to shoot. Li Chen taught Gobu Bao how to shoot arrows, not expecting him to be very accurate, as the range was only 20 meters, making it almost a point-blank scenario. After a few tries, Gobu Bao could shoot the arrows out, though his aim was concerning. Li Chen had him practice on the side while gathering the spear-wielding goblins. He opened the battlefield command page, grouping all the spear-wielding goblins as spear infantry, then had them line up. Watch closely, do this action with me. Li Chen stood at the front of the line, demonstrating a thrust with a long spear. The goblins mimicked his movements and began to thrust. In such a short time, Li Chen didn't expect to turn them into elite soldiers. He just needed them to know how to thrust the spear tip. With the mounted combat system, they could be forced into battle, which was enough for the upcoming skirmish. After practicing for a while, perhaps due to the system's support, the heavy goblins' movements were quite impressive, giving Li Chen more confidence. After more than half an hour, Gobu De returned, panting, with a bag full of red poison fruits. With everything ready, Li Chen took out roasted fish for everyone's second meal, then ordered them to lie down and sleep. One by one, the goblins fell asleep. They felt incredibly happy to be full, thinking their new leader was truly wonderful. As midnight approached, Li Chen woke all the goblins. Now that the goblins in the tribe were all asleep, it was the perfect time to move out. He quietly led the goblins toward the tribe, and they thought their new leader was taking them back to sleep, completely unaware of how crazy Li Chen's next actions would be. He didn't tell them what they were going to do because he understood goblins too well. If they heard they were going to fight the leader, they would surely be scared out of their wits and ruin everything. It was better to keep them in the dark, bring them to the battlefield, and use the system's functions to make them charge before anyone could react. Since goblins had night vision, marching at night posed no difficulty for them, and they quickly reached the grass around the goblin tribe. Li Chen ordered them to stop and instructed the goblins to crush the red poison fruits, evenly spreading the juice on the tips of their spears. He checked each spear tip one by one to ensure the juice was evenly applied. Once everything was done, he ordered everyone to stand still and remain silent, while he quietly sneaked into the goblin tribe to observe the situation. At that moment, everything in the goblin tribe was normal. The goblins found random spots to lie down and sleep, and there wasn't even anyone assigned to keep watch. The morning's ragged-faced team had been gathered by him, and a hunting team hadn't returned, yet no one seemed to care. Especially the leader. That fat guy was lying in a grass hut, snoring loudly, sounding like thunder, showing no intention of sending anyone out to look for them. Perhaps in this guy's eyes, the goblins under him are expendable. When he needs more, he can just pick a few from the younglings and raise them up. As long as the goblins die, that's all that matters. The leader has much more to consider. Being a leader is exhausting, and he must maintain 18 hours of sleep each day. On a dark and windy night, a perfect time for killing and arson, Li Chen no longer waited. He directly selected all troops with F1 and initiated the charge with F3. He sent all his troops forward, planning to use the tactic of ants biting an elephant to take down this fat guy. The goblins behind Li Chen were puzzled, not understanding why the new boss was standing at the tribe's entrance instead of going in. Suddenly, they felt as if their souls were being guided, and one by one, they charged out with their spears. They rushed into the goblin tribe at the fastest speed, heading straight for the only building in the tribe, a small thatched hut. The commotion from the charge startled the other goblins in the tribe. These guys scrambled up from the ground, looking bewildered, not knowing what was happening. Li Chen saw his 19 goblin spearmen rush straight into the thatched hut and thought to himself that the big event was accomplished. Next, all he had to do was stab wildly with spears. Even if the leader was a big goblin, he would only meet his death. Kikikikikikik. Li Chen began to lose his mind, already planning several 5-year plans for when he took control of the tribe. But what he didn't expect was that after a while, there was no commotion at all. The scene of the leader being stabbed and screaming did not occur, and the spear-wielding goblins were surrounding the leader, at a loss. What the hell are you doing? These guys rushed in but didn't kill anyone, they just stood there watching like they were waiting for Sleeping Beauty? At this moment, the goblin leader's snoring stopped. He was awakened. He opened his eyes to see a bunch of little brothers surrounding him, and he was so scared that he let out a howl and jumped up from the ground. Not good. Li Chen was shocked. He remembered that according to the system judgment of Mountain Blade 2, they were not in a hostile relationship with the goblin leader. Moreover, the spear-wielding goblins usually obeyed the leader's orders, so they wouldn't take the initiative to attack him. What do you want? The goblin leader was furious. He regarded the thatched hut as his core territory and would never allow any goblin to step inside. Anyone daring to enter the hut would be killed by him. You dare to howl, 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 howl. The leader wanted to say something more, but suddenly he jumped up, clutching his backside. He reached back and pulled off a wooden arrow that had lodged there. Who shot me? Who shot? Howl, 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 howl. Li Chen, having found his position, shot a second arrow with his wooden bow and then ordered the spear-wielding goblins kill him. Because Li Chen had taken the initiative to attack, the goblin leader was classified as an enemy, and the spear-wielding goblins, who had just been at a loss, raised their spears and aimed at the goblin leader to stab him. 19 spears came stabbing from all directions, and the goblin leader screamed in pain. Traitor! The goblin leader howled in agony. He pulled out an axe from his beastskin skirt, and it was made of iron. Traitor! Die! The goblin leader swung the axe fiercely at a spear-wielding goblin in front of him, directly smashing the opponent's head. Li Chen's pupils shrank sharply. He didn't expect that there would be iron weapons in this primitive tribe, which caught him off guard. Fortunately, there was only one iron weapon, while he had 19 spear-wielding goblins. Even if a pair of fists can't fight against 4 hands, 20 fearless children can overturn an adult. The goblin leader swung the axe wildly, taking down 3 or 4 spear-wielding goblins in quick succession. With his physique, anyone touched by him would almost certainly be killed in one hit. But what terrified the goblin leader was that despite having killed so many traitors, logically, the remaining traitors should have fled in fear long ago. Yet the remaining goblins still surrounded him, attacking him with wooden spears, showing no signs of fear or retreat. This is not normal. This is far from normal. How could a goblin be so brave? Even with such painful casualties, they still want to surround and kill him. This goes against the goblin's instincts. He didn't have time to think much. If he didn't take action soon, it would really be over. He wanted to charge out with his physique, but there were too many goblins surrounding him, and the spears were quite long, poking at him from all directions, making him nearly lose his balance. Unable to break through the encirclement, he shouted loudly to the other goblins in the tribe, "Come on, kill them, kill these traitors." His shout left the goblins who had just woken up somewhat bewildered. They were filled with fear, seeing their once high and mighty leader being stabbed and bloodied by his own kind. Their little brains couldn't comprehend such grand terms as a coup. Come on, kill these traitors." The goblin leader shouted anxiously again. He had already killed 2 traitors, but he was also on the verge of collapse. He felt the wounds being pierced burn painfully, and his head began to spin, making him feel nauseous. His strength was fading. The goblin leader still had some residual authority. After his second call for help, some goblins indeed began to stir and slowly surrounded him. Li Chen felt a tightness in his heart. He had to act quickly to deal with this guy. If he let him shout a couple more times, the goblins might really be swayed. He seized the opportunity, brandishing his wooden spear and charging at the goblin leader. The goblin leader was still hacking and calling out, when suddenly he felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. Looking down, he saw a larger goblin than the others had thrust a spear into his gut. This was a fatal wound, causing him to let out the most intense scream of the night. His eyes were bloodshot and fierce as he glared at Li Chen, gritting his teeth. You are the big goblin." This explained everything. For goblins, rebellion was as traditional as making dumplings during the spring festival. He was furious. How had he not noticed someone evolving into a big goblin in the tribe? Goblins instinctively gather around the strong. It was normal for the other to rally so many traitors, but what was abnormal was how this guy managed to make the traitors unafraid of death. Li Chen had no intention of getting entangled with him. He twisted the spear fiercely, the tip turning inside the goblin leader's belly, severing his intestines, and he let out another painful scream, losing much of his strength. Seizing the opportunity, Li Chen pressed all his weight forward, toppling the guy, and his axe was also flung aside. The chubby goblin fell to the ground, kicking up dust, resembling a mound of meat. The fat on his body created waves which had protected him, allowing him to survive the attacks of 20 spears, but that was it. The spear-wielding goblins surrounded him, and the spears quickly fell, piercing nearly 100 holes in the goblin. leader's body. They weren't very strong, and the wooden spears weren't sharp enough. The wounds were mostly superficial, but they were painful enough, akin to slow slicing. The goblin leader couldn't endure such pain and stopped resisting. He looked up at the towering Li Chen, his voice weak as he pleaded, spare my life. Li Chen glanced back. The goblins who had just been about to rush in to save him stood frozen in place, looking at each other, utterly confused. After the goblin leader begged for mercy, he naturally lost his status as a strong figure, and the other goblins began to question his orders. With the threat gone, Li Chen ordered the spear-wielding goblins to stop stabbing. He threw out a grass rope, instructing them to bind the bloodied goblin leader, then picked up the axe to examine it closely. It was just an ordinary axe, but due to poor maintenance, it had rusted, and the blade was very dull. Li Chen approached the goblin chief, resting his axe against the chief's neck and asked, "Where did you get the axe?" The goblin chief's eyes darted around. "You promise you won't kill me first, and then I'll tell you." Li Chen wasn't going to negotiate with him. Gripping the wooden spear still lodged in the chief's belly, he twisted it fiercely, eliciting a scream akin to that of a slaughtered pig. "I'll tell you. I stole it from a human village to the west." Li Chen was taken aback. "Humans? You mean there are humans to the west? What's going on? Be more specific." Yes. If you follow the Great River west for 4 days, there's a small village of humans near the river. I attacked them before and got killed, and I stole the axe at that time." Li Chen asked, "How many of them are there? How many men and how many women?" This question stumped the goblin chief, who looked troubled and didn't know how to respond. Seeing his expression, Li Chen realized he couldn't count. He pointed at the goblin tribe and asked, "Is the human village bigger than our tribe?" With a comparison to work with, the goblin chief finally knew how to answer. He awkwardly extended 3 fingers with his bound hands. "That many humans would make my tribe this big. So that's over 100 people. You said it takes 4 days to reach the human village. Does that mean the 4 days' journey is the edge of the forest?" This question was crucial. He needed to know how large the magical forest was and their current position within it. If the tribe was only 4 days away from the human-controlled area, he would have to lead the tribe deeper into the magical forest the next moment. In his previous life, Li Chen had read plenty of fantasy works, and goblins like this were usually farmed for experience points by human armies and heroes. Moreover, in this world, goblins had no females and often captured females from other races to reproduce. He could easily imagine that if humans saw goblins, they would likely turn into ruthless killers, chopping them down. Given the current situation of the tribe, encountering humans would mean certain death. They could only retreat and seek other opportunities for development. "No, I don't know where the western edge of the forest is, but it's definitely more than 4 days' journey. The forest is very large." Li Chen felt relieved. As long as they were far enough from the terrifying upright apes, the tribe would be safe. Now that he had become a goblin, his way of thinking was also goblin-like. There was no helping it. After all, he had reincarnated as a goblin in this life, inherently hostile to humans, and could only think of ways to survive. Not only that, but he also wanted to see if he could conquer that human village and obtain more iron tools. After all, the people of this other world had nothing to do with him. They weren't the humans from his previous life, and he felt no guilt about fighting the people of this world. So the question now was, why did those humans venture deep into the monster forest to build a village? The monster forest was filled with dangerous beasts. There were wolves and bears on land, crocodiles in the water, and in the great river, there was that unknown giant creature over 100 meters long, along with intelligent, social monsters like these goblins. In such a vibrant and perilous environment, did the humans come to the monster forest to challenge themselves? He suspected that these humans might have committed some crime and were exiled here by the mainstream human world. Next, Li Chen asked many more questions to understand the situation around the tribe. First, there were many goblin tribes in the forest, but they were all in a primitive and backward state. The goblin chief said that the tribe he controlled was considered relatively large. Secondly, there were other intelligent, social monsters in the forest. The goblin chief had discovered dog-headed people to the east, a type of medium-sized monster with dog heads, generally standing about 1.4 to 1.6 meters tall. They were stronger in combat than goblins, but fewer in number. The goblin chief had clashed with them a few times, with both sides wanting to kill each other and viewing the other as food. After several battles, neither side could eliminate the other, so they reached an understanding. A large tree would serve as the boundary. The hunting grounds west of the tree belonged to the goblin tribe, while the east side was for the kobolds. To the south stood a tall mountain, beneath which lay many caves. The goblin chief said there were cave spiders there, a very dangerous magical creature that could spit silk and spray poison. Any goblin that ventured there never returned. That was all the goblin chief knew. He claimed to have once been a member of a goblin tribe that was destroyed by a forest demon bear, allowing him to escape and gradually grow into a big goblin during his travels. This information was gathered during his time as a wanderer. Later, the goblin chief found the current tribe and settled here, and eventually, some weaker wandering goblins gathered around him, causing the tribe to grow larger. With the support of These goblins, his life became increasingly comfortable and he slowly lost the desire to explore the outside world, spending his days lying around, waiting for death. After the inquiry, Li Chen pressed his axe against the goblin chief's neck. Since there's nothing more to say, let's get going. The goblin chief trembled in fear. No, I've told you everything. You can't kill me, you can't kill me. He wanted to struggle, but he was severely injured and the weapon that attacked him was smeared with red poison, which was now taking effect, leaving him unable to exert any strength. Li Chen opened the prisoner management panel and glanced at it, seeing that the icon representing the goblin chief showed he could be recruited. This guy had already submitted to save his life, but Li Chen chose not to recruit him. Instead, in the face of the chief's terrified gaze, he brought the axe down and severed his head. This guy had ruled the goblin tribe for too long, and all the goblins recognized him as their leader. If he wasn't eliminated, Li Chen would never be able to fully control the goblin tribe. Li Chen kicked the head into the crowd of goblins, causing them to scatter in fright. He walked to the center of the tribe, stepped on the former chief's head, and smiled at the goblins. From now on, I am the boss. Who's in favor, and who's against? The next day, the sun rose again, and the goblin tribe had a new leader. As the tallest and strongest goblin, Li Chen naturally took the position without contest. As a goblin with a human soul, he would not allow the goblin tribe to remain in chaos. He organized the goblins into groups, sending half to the hunting team, with 30 in each group, forming 5 groups that spread out in all directions to find prey. Li Chen warned them that any prey they caught must be brought back for him to distribute. Anyone who dared to keep the prey for themselves would meet a terrible end. The remaining half became a work team, and Li Chen's first task for them was to dig pits to bury the more than 30 corpses that had died from the red poison fruit. Damn it! Those corpses had been in the tribe for 2 days and were already starting to smell. The former chief was truly impressive. He had no sense of management whatsoever. Although goblins are as resilient as cockroaches, they can also get sick and die. If the corpses caused a plague, it could wipe them out in one go. After assigning the tasks, Li Chen recruited 7 goblins to make up for yesterday's losses and then took 19 soldiers to hunt horned crocodiles. It had already been proven that hunting horned crocodiles with red poison fruit was very effective. Li Chen spent the entire day in a frenzy of hunting, killing a total of 21 horned crocodiles, which directly leveled him up to level 10. His vitality increased from 8 to 12, and his height reached 1.8 meters, making him relatively tall even among big goblins. Meanwhile, his running skill was maxed out at level 5, and the extra specialization points were all allocated to one-handed weapons. Now he had obtained an iron axe and planned to practice his proficiency with one-handed weapons, as it might come in handy later. The hunting stopped by evening. Li Chen instructed the goblins to work together to turn over the horned crocodiles they had killed today. He used an axe to slice open the belly of a horned crocodile and peeled off the entire hide. The leather of the horned crocodile was a very precious material for armor, and now that they had iron tools, they had to collect it all. He also smashed off the horns with the back of his axe, preserving them properly. The loot from the day's monster grinding and the items collected from the horned crocodiles were as follows: grains times 42 horned crocodile hides times 37 horned crocodile horns times 5 horned crocodile tendons times 11 dinars. 1890. Such a large haul made Li Chen grin from ear to ear, but he was troubled by the many horned crocodile corpses on the ground. Could their meat still be eaten? These horned crocodiles had been poisoned by Li Chen using red poison fruit, which exhibited an almost otherworldly toxicity. This plant was likely a magical one, otherwise, the poison wouldn't be so potent. However, looking at the 21 horned crocodile corpses before him, he couldn't bear to leave them to rot here. He had seen a documentary that said many natural toxins lose their potency when heated to high temperatures, as the proteins would be destroyed. He wasn't sure if this rule applied in another world. He planned to process the meat and have someone taste it to see if it would be poisonous. Li Chen took a piece of horned crocodile meat, washed it thoroughly with water, skewered it on a branch, and roasted it over the fire, turning it into jerky, cooked until it was so tough that it would be hard to chew. He called Gobu over. You performed bravely today, so here's a meat skewer for you. Li Chen had no moral qualms as he handed the skewer to Gobu. Gobu's face lit up with surprise as he devoured the skewer in a few bites. Li Chen stared intently at Gobu, who stared back at him. Do you feel anything special? Li Chen asked. Gobu scratched his face. No, oh, yes. Li Chen grew anxious and urged him to speak quickly. Gobu looked shy. Boss, I feel like I'm still not full. Li Chen rolled his eyes, letting him eat freely to see if the poison was insufficient. He also let the other goblins eat. If they died, he could recruit more, and if they didn't die, it would be a huge profit. The results were promising. After more than an hour, none of the 19 goblins showed any signs of poisoning. Li Chen breathed a sigh of relief. He figured either the toxicity was concentrated in the horned crocodile's intestines and hadn't spread elsewhere, or that high temperatures could indeed destroy the proteins of the red poison fruit's toxins. Now, none of this meat would go to waste. Li Chen immediately ordered everyone to start processing the horned crocodiles, cutting all the meat off and skewering it to take back to the tribe. He specifically warned the goblins not to touch the internal organs of the horned crocodiles. Due to the large workload, Li Chen sent Gobu back to the tribe to call over the goblins from the work team. When they saw the ground covered in horned crocodile meat, they were all stunned. They had never seen so much meat in their lives. Each horned crocodile weighed at least 500 kilograms, and the meat they had processed was over 300 kilograms. Once they handled this meat, it would be enough for them to eat until next month. The morale of the goblin tribe soared instantly. They looked up to Li Chen with admiration. Being able to gather so much meat made their leader shine like the sun. The era of the former leader was gone for good. Li Chen instructed the goblins to take the meat back to the tribe and warned them not to steal any, mainly fearing that the unprocessed meat might be toxic. Upon arriving at the tribe, Li Chen built a huge bonfire in the center and sent the goblins to the spring in the back mountain to wash the cut meat clean, slice it thin, and roast it by the bonfire. It had to be dried into jerky. Listen up, everyone. Work hard for me. No stealing. As long as you all do well, tonight I'll let you eat until you're full. Li Chen's promise plunged the goblins into a sea of joy, and they worked with renewed vigor, their movements quickening. Before long, several thousand strips of processed horned crocodile meat were laid out to roast over the bonfire, and a rich meaty aroma spread throughout the area. By this time, the sky had darkened, and the hunting team returned one after another, astonished to see so much meat in the tribe. They had been running around the mountains all day, only finding a few small animals and wild fruits. How could the tribe be filled with meat upon their return? Did they wander into the wrong tribe? Li Chen saw the hunting team had returned and instructed them to stand in line, placing their finds in front of him for inspection, one by one. The first hunting team had a few dead rabbits and some berries, not a lot, but enough for their daily consumption, indicating they had put in some effort. Li Chen nodded in satisfaction and approached a few of the goblins, carefully sniffing them. The goblins were puzzled by Li Chen's actions and could only stand still for him to smell. After checking each of them, Li Chen casually slapped the head of the hunting team. Damn it! Have you all not bathed for days? Get your asses over there and wash up until you smell clean, or you're not allowed to eat meat. The head of the hunting team, who had been slapped, looked delighted, understanding that if they washed up, they could eat meat. He immediately led the goblin hunting team, scampering off to the spring on the back mountain to bathe. Li Chen continued to check the harvests of two more hunting teams. Their situations were similar, having caught small game, neither too much nor too little. After sniffing them, he sent them off to wash up and then eat dried meat. When he checked the fourth hunting team, he found only a few berries and a pitiful amount of insects. Li Chen frowned. This was too little, something was off. He looked at the head of the hunting team, who was gazing at him with a fawning expression, clearly eager to wash up and eat meat. Li Chen leaned in closer, sniffing him carefully, and detected a strong smell of blood. Instantly furious, he grabbed the goblin by the neck and slammed him to the ground. I told you, all captured prey must be brought back for me to distribute. You thought you could sneak a bite, huh? You think you can outsmart me? Li Chen tightened his grip on the goblin's throat, nearly choking him. He had just smelled blood on him, meaning this hunting team had eaten their catch before returning. He absolutely would not allow anyone to defy his orders. Goblins are creatures devoid of humanity and family values. The only thing that can restrain them is the ruler's might. If even that fails, his rule could easily collapse, so any signs of rebellion must be crushed decisively. Li Chen didn't give the goblin a chance to speak, drawing his axe from his waist and swinging it at the goblin's forehead, delivering a fatal blow. Li Chen pointed his axe at the panicking goblin hunting team and ordered the spear-wielding goblins, go, 3 for 1 kill. The spear-wielding goblins immediately sprang into action, surrounding the hunting team with their spears, causing the hunting goblins to sit down in fear. However, the spear-wielding goblins looked puzzled. What did 3 for 1 kill mean? Li Chen was exasperated, holding up 3 fingers. This means 3 goblins. He then folded one finger down. Kill one of the 3. The spear-wielding goblins suddenly understood and began their slaughter. The sounds of screams filled the air as the hunting team goblins were quickly stabbed down one after another. Li Chen was very satisfied with this. The other goblins were filled with terror, which was exactly what he wanted. To rule over goblins, one could only establish a reign of terror. But as the killing continued, Li Chen noticed something was off. Damn it, the hunting team of over 30 had lost fewer than 10. What kind of math was this, taught by a gym teacher? Li Chen quickly called for a stop. He wanted 3 for 1 kill, not 3 for 3 kills. However, the orders had already been carried out. One couldn't slap their own face, so they could only move on to the next page. Li Chen pointed at the corpse on the ground and roared at the goblins. Look clearly. This is the consequence of disobeying orders. From now on, if you follow my commands, you'll eat your fill of meat. If you don't, you'll die. Having established his authority, Li Chen inspected the last hunting team's catch. The little leader of this hunting team had only one ear, and when he saw Li Chen approaching, he immediately knelt down. Li Chen asked, "Did you steal the prey?" The one-eared goblin trembled and shook his head. No. Then it's fine, as long as you don't disobey orders, it's all good. Kneeling won't help if you break the rules. Li Chen looked at the prey they had brought back. It was quite standard rabbits, wild chickens, bird eggs, berries, and some fruits that were hard to identify, in considerable quantity. The hunting team didn't smell of blood, and Li Chen was very satisfied. He was about to send this hunting team to wash up and eat, but suddenly he spotted something familiar: potatoes. Damn! Li Chen grabbed the potato and held it up for a closer look. Looks like a potato. He scraped the skin off with his nail and brought it to his nose to sniff. Smells like a potato. He opened his mouth and took a bite out of the potato, chewing carefully. Tastes like a potato. Damn, this is a potato. Li Chen yanked the kneeling one-eared goblin up and shook his shoulders wildly. Where did you find this? Is there more? Near the spider's nest by the cave, and there are many more. The mountains are full of these roots. Li Chen's breath became heavy, and his face twisted with ecstasy. Potatoes. They could provide a large amount of starch, adaptable to a wide range of planting regions, and had an extremely high yield. Good, very good. You've done well. Li Chen patted the goblin's shoulder. I bestow upon you the name One Ear. From now on, you will be the captain of this hunting team, and you will receive double the food every day. Now, take your team to wash up, and after that, you can eat as much dried meat as you want. One Ear was overjoyed. This meant he had made it, right? He was now a leader. Seeing the envious gazes of the other goblins, Li Chen decided to take the opportunity to establish a hierarchy. He picked up a piece of dried meat and waved it in front of the goblins. This was roughly the amount a goblin could barely fill their stomach with. Listen up, from now on, the work team will get to eat one piece of meat like this every day. The hunting team, due to the dangers they face, will get 1.5 pieces daily, and the hunting team captain will get 2 pieces. If they encounter enemies, soldiers participating in the battle can eat 3 pieces a day, and if they achieve merit, they can receive 10 pieces at once. One Ear found useful crops, which counts as merit, so he gets 10 pieces of dried meat. The little goblins couldn't grasp the meaning of those numbers, so Li Chen simply stacked the dried meat into several piles, letting the goblins know what kind of treatment they could expect based on their status. The goblins' eyes all fell on the stacked 10 pieces of dried meat, and at that moment, they had formed an impression in their little heads. As long as they achieved merit, they could get lots and lots of meat. In the following days, the tribe developed steadily. Li Chen assigned many tasks to the goblins, starting with the construction of a pen for raising wood mice. Wood mice are large animals that look like rats. They are docile, unconcerned about anything, and just keep eating grass, trees, anything. Of course, as the only animal in the goblin tribe that hadn't been eaten, they had their special qualities. They breed exceptionally well. Moreover, their size was just right, making them suitable for the goblins to use as breeding tools. When the previous leader was in charge, these wood mice were loosely tied up by the trees for free range. Li Chen intended to implement strict management, and in the future, only goblins who achieved merit would be allowed to reproduce. In addition, the second building he had constructed was a nursery, a simple hut made of wood and leaves, with a rudimentary earthen bed in the middle, where a fire could be lit for warmth. During the goblin cub stage, Li Chen faced death every day. He was acutely aware that the goblin tribe's laissez-faire attitude towards goblin cubs resulted in a mortality rate exceeding 80%. A change had to be made. This was not a moral perspective of wanting future generations to avoid the reign that their predecessors had endured, but purely for development. Population was the key factor for growth. To secure enough adult goblins, it was essential to protect the goblin cubs and help them survive their weakest phase. After the nursery was completed, Li Chen had his own housing built. He instructed the goblins to construct a wooden house using sticks, about 40 square meters, which was infinitely more refined than the grass hut of the previous goblin leader. In a tribe where everyone had to sleep on the ground, he could sleep in a small house, which seemed a bit corrupt. But, as the great leader of the tribe, should he not enjoy some comforts while shouldering the rise and fall of the tribe? Ordinary goblins only needed to think about how to work, but as their leader, he had much more to consider. The tribe was thriving, but Li Chen discovered a serious problem. Without iron tools, the tribe's development was painfully slow. If this issue was not resolved, the tribe would remain stuck in the primitive era. Li Chen stood at the entrance of the leader's wooden house, looking westward. The human village, it's time to take a look. Li Chen made up his mind to raid a human village. After all, they were people from another world, and he felt no psychological burden in doing so. However, with these stinky goblins under his command, he was genuinely afraid of sending them to their doom, so he needed to prepare in advance. First, he initiated conscription. Aside from the 19 system soldiers he could absolutely trust, Li Chen recruited 200 goblins to become full-time soldiers. He prepared wooden spears for each goblin and then had them undergo military training. The training content was simple: thrusting with spears to enhance their combat power, running to improve their mobility, and standing at attention to boost their obedience and team spirit. The first 2 tasks were manageable. Under the temptation of food, the goblins could complete them. However, the last task of standing at attention was a real challenge. Goblins were naturally restless, each one like they had ADHD. Asking them to stand still under the sun for an hour was sheer torture. Li Chen personally supervised, but after several attempts, it was still ineffective. These guys would start fidgeting, whispering, or even just sit down on the ground, giving Li Chen a severe headache. Standing at attention was indeed torturous, not to mention goblins, even humans found it hard to endure without veteran supervision. This exercise was primarily to cultivate individual obedience to military orders. After all, was there any meaning in making troops stand still under the sun for an hour? No. But if soldiers could resolutely obey such meaningless orders, wouldn't they be even more compliant when sent on various tactical missions in the future? Especially for goblins, these magical creatures, they should undergo the baptism of standing at attention to instill in them unconditional obedience to commands. For this reason, Li Chen was determined the goblins had to pass the standing training. He corrected them several times, even resorting to using a military stick, but it still didn't work. This clashed with the goblins' chaotic instincts. Li Chen finally lost his temper. He called over the spear-wielding goblins and had them stand in front of the goblin formation. Keep an eye on them. If anyone dares to move, speak, or wander around, kill them on the spot. Li Chen was tired of arguing with them and directly used the language the goblins understood best: disobey and you die. Sure enough, this method was very effective. Faced with the deadly spears of their kind, the goblins stood there, not daring to move or speak, remaining silent for 3 hours. Li Chen nodded in satisfaction. Indeed, goblins were still in need of discipline, and this was the way to do it. If things continued like this, he was confident he could cultivate the obedience of these goblins within a month, and after a month, he would be able to send troops out. In addition to military training, Li Chen had other preparations. First was to continue leveling up. Every day, he took the soldiers to hunt horned crocodiles. Not only did he need to level up himself, but he also needed to upgrade the goblins under his command. These goblins were simply too short. Fighting them against humans was like children battling adults. He had to train all 19 soldiers into level 2 big goblins. To this end, he had been continuously hunting horned crocodiles for 2 days. Finally, the first goblin spear that followed him accumulated enough experience. Li Chen clicked to upgrade on the soldier management page, spending 80 dinars to upgrade the goblin spear into a big goblin. The height of the goblin spear instantly rose to 1.7 meters. He looked at his strong body in disbelief. The surging power made him feel a refreshing transformation. Li Chen pulled the goblin spear in front of the other goblins and shouted, "The goblin spear has fought bravely. I have bestowed him with strength. From now on, he will be the second big goblin in the tribe. Don't you want to gain the same power? Do you? If you do, then fight hard for me." Ding! You have successfully delivered a speech, igniting the enthusiasm of the goblins. Charm proficiency +1. Seeing the goblins' fervent fighting spirit, Li Chen was very pleased. As long as they could maintain this enthusiasm, conquering the human tribes would truly be no problem. In the following days, the horned crocodiles by the river suffered greatly, lured ashore and slaughtered by the goblins. Many goblins accumulated enough experience, and Li Chen upgraded them all to big goblins. The combat power of big goblins was stronger than that of human males, and their intelligence was comparable to that of humans. Li Chen decided that once all the goblins in his hands were promoted to big goblins, he would send troops to the human villages. In addition to increasing the quality of soldiers, Li Chen was also crafting weapons and equipment suitable for big goblins, mainly armor and crossbows. As for armor, he currently had axes, and by sharpening the axes, he could perform simple processing on the horned crocodile skin. However, the skin on the back of the horned crocodile was very thick and hard, and the axe couldn't cut through it, making processing impossible. Unless he had tools like iron picks or chisels, he could only process the hardest part of the crocodile skin by drilling and connecting. Li Chen temporarily gave up on processing the back of the horned crocodile and began cutting the softer belly skin. Although this white leather was soft, its defensive power was also impressive, capable of withstanding small poundage crossbows and knife slashes without issue. Li Chen immediately ordered the goblins to make 20 sets of soft armor. He personally demonstrated to the goblins how to make it, cutting the soft belly leather of the horned crocodile with an axe, using 2 pieces of leather for the front and back, tying them together with rope to finish. The shoulder armor was attached to the chest armor with a large piece of crocodile skin, followed by the skirt armor, leg armor, and hand armor. This crocodile armor was quite lightweight, allowing for agile movement while providing decent defense. Li Chen was very satisfied. Now he had 19 light-armored infantry. To showcase his status, Li Chen focused on crafting a special armor for himself, essentially a thickened version made of 2 layers of crocodile skin, enhancing the defense at the chest. Then he took a horned crocodile skull, separating the upper and lower jaws to wear on his head. From a distance, it looked quite imposing, like a crocodile. Man! The other goblins, seeing this operation, were all inspired and borrowed axes from Li Chen to chop off horned crocodile heads to make helmets. Now all 19 big goblins wore crocodile helmets, looking somewhat like a demonic army, which should serve to intimidate their enemies. The set of horned crocodile leather armor crafted by Li Chen has been recognized by the system and can be stored in the warehouse, where its attributes can be viewed. Name: Reinforced Horned Crocodile Leather Armor. Weight 15 kilograms. Armor type light. Armor head defense 12, body defense 24, shoulder defense 13, hand defense 13, leg defense 13. Description: lightweight armor with slight magical resistance, affinity to water. Elements: the wearer will confuse horned crocodiles into thinking they are kin, preventing them from attacking. Li Chen was very satisfied. The armor's attributes were quite impressive, and it was made from leftover horned crocodile materials. If he could obtain other iron tools, he could process the thickest part of the horned crocodile's back. Imagine the defensive capabilities of armor made from that. Li Chen felt even more eager to raid human villages. With the armor ready, he also needed to arrange for weapons. Given the current conditions of the tribe, he couldn't make any good melee weapons, but Li Chen had plenty of horned crocodile tendons, which meant he could craft crossbows. Just in time. Li Chen had forged so much armor recently that his forging skill had increased to 25 points, unlocking a 2-choice skill branch. 1. Pottery making, you will gain knowledge related to pottery production. 2. Bow and crossbow making, you will gain knowledge related to bow and crossbow production. In Mountain Blade 2, when a player's skill proficiency reaches 25 points, they can choose one from 2 subskills, and every additional 25 points allows for another selection. Now that Li Chen's forging skill had reached 25 points, he could make a choice. The first option, pottery making, was quite tempting. Firing pottery is a significant symbol of human civilization's progress, and it would be the same here among goblins. However, with the expedition imminent, increasing armament was the top priority, and pottery technology wasn't particularly difficult. Li Chen could already make simple pottery himself, so he directly chose the second option, bow and crossbow making. After clicking confirm, Li Chen felt a wealth of crossbow making knowledge flood into his mind, and it took him quite a while to fully absorb this information. At that moment, he was a master crossbow maker, and looking at the 2 simple wooden bows he had made earlier, he felt nothing but disdain. How could such shabby things be his creations? He destroyed both wooden bows. Just looking at those broken items made him want to explode. The goblin bow looked at him with a pitiful expression, like a child with a broken toy. Why are you crying? Are you going to keep this junk for the new year? Come on, I'll make you something better. Li Chen took the goblin bow into the forest, searching for a type of tree called pine nut wood. The newly acquired knowledge about crossbows informed him that the trunk of this tree is very tough and has good flexibility, making it an excellent material for crafting crossbows. However, Li Chen didn't plan to use it for a bow. He wanted to make a crossbow. Training archers takes too long, and Li Chen didn't have time to wait for them to develop. Comparatively, training crossbowmen was much simpler. Crossbowmen only need to pull back the string and charge it to aim calmly, unlike bows, which require effort to maintain the drawn state. Shaking hands, like having Parkinson's, makes hitting a target very difficult. After running for half a day, they found a pine nut tree. Li Chen instructed the goblin bow to chop down the tree with an axe, strip the bark, and cut it into suitable wooden blocks. Li Chen chose to make a crossbow with a simple cross design, just 2 wooden sticks pieced together with a few small wooden blocks to create the mechanism. By the end of the first day, he had completed a crossbow and successfully tested it. Its range exceeded 120 meters, with impressive penetration. Even with wooden arrows, it penetrated the tree trunk by a finger's depth. In the cold weapon era, this thing could be considered a low-end handgun. Li Chen stored the completed crossbow in the warehouse, where the weapon's attributes were displayed. Name: extremely simple crossbow. Weight: 3 kilograms. Weapon type: light crossbow. Damage: 35 piercing. Ammunition flight speed: 70 meters per second. Effective range: 120 meters. Evaluation: an emergency product. The crossbow body has not undergone drying treatment, has not been painted, and the crossbow mechanism is wooden, with limited strength. It may be damaged in intense combat, and there is still much room for improvement. The system evaluation is acknowledged by Li Chen. This crossbow is indeed an emergency product. If there were enough time and more materials, he could create a more powerful crossbow, but fortunately, the current ones are sufficient. Li Chen immediately began to expand production, working alone at a rate of 3 crossbows per day, producing a total of 20 crossbows. There was no choice. With only 1 axe available, productivity was too low. However, this also had its benefits, as it allowed him to brush up on his forging skills. The making of crossbow bolts was also quite simple. Using the teeth of the horned crocodile for the arrowheads would suffice. He assigned this task to other goblins, asking each to make 40. He also had them use horned crocodile leather to make quivers. After a month of preparation, it was time to march out. Li Chen filled the writing and hacking warehouse with various jerky, dried fish, and grains. The 20 big goblins under him were dressed in horned crocodile armor, wielding wooden spears and crossbows. 200 goblins who had undergone preliminary military training lined up in formation, armed with wooden spears and small stones, serving a role of filling lines and harassment. As they set out for the human village, Li Chen found a goblin with one ear and said to him, "From now on, I appoint you as the executive vice leader. During my absence, you must manage the tribe well." The one-eared goblin was stunned. He thought the boss would take him along on the expedition, but instead, he was left behind. "Be boss. Take me with you." I want to achieve military merit too. Li Chen patted the one-eared goblin's shoulder. Don't worry, during my absence, just manage the tribe well, and when I return, it will count as your military achievement. Additionally, I have a few tasks for you. Li Chen pointed to the wooden house in the center of the tribe and said, first, that is my house. No one is allowed to enter. Anyone who dares to go in will be killed without mercy. The one-eared goblin was startled and hurriedly nodded. Boss, don't worry, I will definitely keep an eye on the house. No one can go in. Li Chen smiled sinisterly. I hope so. In fact, he didn't care whether anyone entered the house. He was conducting a compliance test. He wanted to see if the remaining goblins could be intimidated during his absence. If they could be intimidated, that would be great, and he would be very happy, leading to further trust in the one-eared goblin. If they couldn't be intimidated and the wooden house was occupied by other goblins, he wouldn't be angry. He would simply kill 1 out of 3 to reassert his authority. So he wouldn't lose anything regardless. Then, Li Chen raised his second finger in front of the one-eared goblin. The second task I give you is to increase the population. There are 70 goblins left for you in the tribe, and there are over 30 wood mice. These creatures can give birth to at least 3 goblin pups per litter, with a half-month gestation period, and the goblin pups mature in half a month. I hope that when I return, the goblin tribe's population will at least double. If you can achieve this, I will reward you handsomely. The one-eared goblin was stunned. Was this even a task? This was completely a reward. For goblins, reproduction is instinctual, and being able to satisfy their reproductive desires made this task very appealing. The one-eared goblin looked at Li Chen with reverence, feeling that he could never repay the leader's kindness. Li Chen raised his third finger. The third task is to cultivate the land around the tribe by any means necessary and plant the potatoes you found last time. Ha? Plant potatoes? But I don't know how. The goblin tribe had never domesticated any other plants or animals besides wood mice. To the one-eared goblin, planting seemed like high-tech. No problem. I'll teach you. Li Chen found a wooden spear, loosened the soil, dug a hole, buried a potato inside, and then dug a pit every so often to throw in more potatoes, leaving their fate to the heavens. Li Chen didn't expect such a crude planting method to yield a high potato harvest. It was just a way to keep the remaining goblins occupied with some productive activity. After all, the brothers were fighting hard on the front lines while those at home enjoyed a carefree life, right? Work hard. My executive vice chief. After arranging matters in the tribe, Li Chen gathered the troops, brandishing his axe and pointing westward. March! To the human village. The goblin army set out, and Li Chen led the troops west along the Great River. The journey was nothing but travel, marching for 16 hours a day. Li Chen was worried the goblins might not be able to handle it, but he wanted to test their physical limits, and he was somewhat astonished. As long as they were provided with enough water and food, they could keep walking indefinitely. Li Chen developed a little marching trick. Whenever the goblins' morale dipped, he would hand out jerky, 1 piece for each, without needing to stop, and they could merrily continue marching. The consequence of this was a significant food consumption. Each goblin needed to eat 6 pieces of jerky a day. Fortunately, Li Chen had hunted a lot of horned crocodiles over the past month, so as long as they could speed up their march, they could eat as much jerky as they wanted. With ample food supplies, it didn't even take 4 days. By the 3rd day, the goblin army had reached the vicinity of the human village. Around noon that day, Li Chen led the troops along the riverbank when suddenly, he raised his fist to signal the marching troops to stop. Li Chen twitched his nose, catching the scent carried by the wind. The smell of smoke. In the vast magical forest, there weren't many creatures that could start a fire, and Li Chen knew he had arrived. All troops enter the forest to camp, eat, and then sleep. No talking, no wandering around. Violators will be killed. Li Chen ordered the troops to hide in the forest, making sure they weren't spotted by humans, or they would lose the advantage. He divided the big goblins into 2 groups, sending one with the big goblin to keep an eye on the little goblins while he took the other group to sneak towards the human tribe to scout. Bow and crossbow ready, keep your ears up and eyes wide open. If you see anything unusual, shout for me immediately. Li Chen led the way forward, with the big goblins closely following him. Before long, the smell of smoke grew stronger, and there were numerous signs of human activity on the ground. In the game Mountain Blade 2, Bannerlord, there's a scouting skill that allows Li Chen to glean various information from the traces on the ground. There were many signs ahead, quite mixed, but the scouting skill marked all the information. Trace 1, number of people 3, time 3 days ago. Trace 2, number of people 5, time 2 days ago. Trace 3, number of people 4, time 1 day ago. The number of people who left these traces wasn't large. Li Chen speculated they might be a human hunting party, and this was the main activity area for humans. Everyone be careful, we might encounter enemies here. Li Chen instructed, leading the troops to continue forward. As they walked, Li Chen had them stop again. The scouting skill indicated danger among the grass ahead. Li Chen used his wooden spear to sweep away the dead branches and leaves, revealing a trap. He picked up a stone and smashed it onto the trap, which snapped shut with a loud crack. Li Chen picked up the trap and handed it to the goblin behind him, telling him to hold it. It was a rare piece of ironware. The group continued forward, finding 4 more traps, and they encountered other traps that Li Chen eliminated using his scouting skill. They stealthily advanced 3 kilometers from where the main force was stationed, and the forest began to thin out. Li Chen saw the human encampment and was left dumbfounded. Damn, how am I supposed to play this? They had indeed found the human village, but the damn village had walls. Outside the forest, a piece of land had been cleared, where some human farmers were tilling the soil. Behind the land stood a wooden wall, about 3 meters high, obscuring the view of what lay beyond, but it was likely just housing. Inside the wooden wall, there was a watchtower, approximately 7 meters tall. Li Chen saw 2 humans on the watchtower, chatting, each holding a longbow, resembling the English longbow style. They wore helmets and chainmail, with long swords at their waists. Li Chen felt a pang of frustration. He wanted to drag out the former goblin chief and whip the corpse. Didn't BYD mention a village? Wasn't this a castle? Yes, the wooden fortress before him was recognized by the mounted combat system. The buildings in the mounted combat system mainly fall into 3 categories: villages, castles, and towns. Villages serve the purpose of conscription and supply, nothing special. Castles, however, are formidable. Players can garrison troops inside, and the walls can withstand attacks from multiple enemies. Additionally, players can construct various buildings within the castle slots to produce resources or train troops. Towns are even more powerful. Once players occupy a town, they can use it as a base to declare themselves king. The fortress before him was marked by the system as difficult garrison, and Li Chen nearly laughed out loud upon seeing the name. He was 100% certain that this group had been exiled here by the mainstream human world, and they had a rather grim sense of humor to name it difficult garrison. Laughing aside, the problem was how to take down difficult garrison. He had no engineering tools, and with just the few people he brought, attacking a village was one thing, but a castle was truly suicidal. Li Chen pondered for a while, found no solution, and decided to retreat, waiting for nightfall to seek an opportunity. But then, an unexpected turn of events occurred. 3 figures emerged from the open castle gate, 2 soldiers clad in chainmail, with long swords at their sides. The other was a young man dressed in bright green clothing, also with a long sword, longbow, quiver, and leading a hunting dog, looking like a young nobleman heading out to hunt. The nobleman led the dog straight toward where Li Chen and his group were hiding. Seeing this, Li Chen wanted to pull back. He didn't want to expose himself, and he needed to plan carefully for the castle assault. However, just as he was about to leave, the nobleman's hunting dog suddenly barked loudly. Vic, sit. Vic, sit. The nobleman tried to calm his dog, but it seemed possessed, barking toward the forest. One of the guards behind the nobleman said, "Young Master Lance, it seems Vic has spotted something." The nobleman named Lance's eyes lit up, and he immediately let go of the dog's leash, which dashed out. Just as Li Chen was preparing to leave, the hunting dog charged at him like the wind. Li Chen narrowed his eyes and drew his axe. The dog leaped over the farmland, through the bushes, and into the forest, jumping high in front of Li Chen, its jaws wide open, ready to bite. Li Chen had been prepared. He swung his axe down with great force, splitting the dog's head in half, the blade driving deep into its abdomen, turning the dog into a zombie dog from a horror game. At that moment, young Master Lance, along with the 2 guards, rushed in. Since being exiled here, hunting had become his only source of enjoyment. Vic, did you catch something? Vic, you, young Master Lance dashed into the forest and suddenly locked eyes with 10 pairs of green, glimmering eyes, freezing in place. Li Chen squinted slightly, observing the young man's attire. He seemed to hold a significant position in the castle, and now that he had delivered himself right to Li Chen, there was no chance of letting him go. Li Chen swung his axe fiercely, tossing the dog's corpse aside, and then lunged forward. Gee, Goblin! Young Master Lance finally reacted, his heart filled with terror. He wanted to draw his sword, but Li Chen's fist was already upon him. With all his strength, Li Chen delivered a powerful blow to young Master Lance's face, knocking him down. Young Master! The 2 guards, seeing their master knocked out by a goblin, immediately panicked and drew their long swords to confront him. Li Chen would not engage in a hard fight. He took a step back and shouted behind him, "Fire the arrows!" The 9 goblins behind him, who had been holding their crossbows, immediately raised their hands and shot upon hearing the command. 2 soldiers let out a scream as several crossbow bolts pierced their bodies. However, since they were wearing chainmail and had padded armor made of compressed cotton underneath, they had some degree of protection. With the 2 layers of armor, although the crossbow bolts penetrated their defenses and embedded themselves in their flesh, they did not go in deeply, at most causing minor injuries. The goblins' archery was a bit slow, mainly because they were aiming. When Li Chen saw that his companion's crossbow bolts had not killed the 2 men, he quickly adjusted his aim at the unprotected faces of the soldiers and pulled the trigger. With a whoosh, the arrow struck one soldier in the face, knocking him down instantly. Taking advantage of the other soldier's pain from the arrow, Li Chen charged forward and slammed into the other soldier's chest, knocking him over. The soldier tried to get up, but Li Chen jumped on him, yanked off his helmet, and swung an axe down. With a crunch, 12 experience points were credited. The 2 soldiers made a loud commotion as they died, which was heard by the farmers who were working the fields. They looked toward the forest and saw the goblins stripping the armor off the soldiers, causing them to scream and run toward the castle. The two archers in the watchtower also noticed that something was wrong and immediately rang the alarm bell, the sound echoing around the castle. Inside the castle, in a relatively tidy wooden house, a woman was fiddling with glassware, concocting some kind of potion, occasionally flipping through a book in front of her to check the necessary knowledge. Hearing the alarm bell, she frowned. Were there monsters attacking again? There were too many monsters in the magical forest. And every day, monsters would sneak into the castle, already affecting their agricultural expansion. The woman thought the soldiers would handle it well, so she ignored it and planned to continue her potion research. But a soldier came to knock on the door. "Miss Hannah, it's bad. There are enemies in the forest." The woman named Hannah frowned, set down her work, picked up a long sword to hang at her waist, and grabbed a wooden staff. She opened the door and asked, "What happened?" "Miss Hannah, the soldiers on the wall reported that a group of goblins has sneaked into the forest near the castle, and the young master happened to encounter them while hunting. We don't know if the young master is safe." "What?" Hannah was shocked and ran out of the wooden house to the wall, climbing up in just a few steps. At this moment, all the soldiers in the castle had gathered on the wall, but upon a careful glance, there were only a little over 50 who could fight, and there were fewer than 10 professional soldiers in armor. The rest were militiamen in simple clothing, holding hoes. Hannah rushed to the side of an elderly man in a robe and a tall man clad in full Western armor, anxiously asking, "Butler Mond, Knight Leo, what's going on? What happened?" Butler Mond looked anxious as well, trembling as he replied, "Farmers saw goblins sneaking around the edge of the forest, and the young master happened to take his guards to hunt in the forest, running into this group of goblins. Now 2 soldiers have been killed, their bodies left at the forest's edge, and the young master is missing." Hannah immediately panicked, her beautiful face tightening. "Then why are you still standing here? Hurry and send troops to find the young master." Knight Leo's brows were deeply furrowed as he explained, "This group of goblins is not simple. They were able to kill 2 armored guards in an instant. Their strength cannot be underestimated. Moreover, the farmers said these goblins are very tall, all big goblins, and they seem to have crossbow-like weapons." "Miss Hannah, I don't need to explain what crossbows mean, do I? These are weapons that even we are not allowed to possess." Knight Leo sighed. The kingdom's laws prohibited the private possession of crossbows, and violators faced execution. Only the regular army could be equipped with them. Before Master Lance's father participated in the coup, the Baron's Guard had a quota of 50 crossbows, but now they and the young master had been exiled deep into the magical forest to clear land, without even a single crossbow. How tragic. Miss Hannah was furious when she heard them say they wouldn't go to rescue the young master just because the goblins had crossbows. "You're just going to stand here and watch the young master get captured over something like this? He could be in danger at any moment. As his vassals, how can you just stand by and do nothing?" Faced with her accusations, the two felt a bit ashamed, but it was only a slight shame. They stood there without even shifting their weight. Ever since they were exiled to the depths of the magical forest, the splendor and wealth of the kingdom's capital had nothing to do with them anymore. Glory, money, and power had all slipped away, and they had become numb, living like walking corpses, taking each day as it came. Butler Mond and Knight Leo exchanged glances, and the butler spoke up to advise, "Miss Hannah, please calm down. Goblins are bloodthirsty monsters. If the young master has fallen into their hands, he may have already met his end." Knight Leo added, "Yes, I know goblins well. These bloodthirsty bastards eat anything. The young master has probably already become their dinner. Moreover, Miss Hannah, you know the habits of goblins, they have no females. Goblins reproduce using other female animals." He looked Hannah up and down, his gaze carrying a certain implication. "Miss Hannah, that group of goblins is of unknown number, and they have powerful weapons like crossbows, with fewer than 10 regular soldiers. Here and a bunch of old farmers. Do you really think we can defeat them and rescue the young master? Do you understand the risks of going into battle? If we men lose, it's one thing, we can die. But if you, Miss Hannah, were captured." He didn't finish his sentence, but Hannah's face turned pale immediately. As an apprentice at a magic academy, she knew a lot. Goblins were a cursed species by the goddess of life, and they did not give birth to female goblins. However, before the goblin god died, he used all his divine power to bless the goblin race, removing their reproductive isolation. This was the greatest mockery of the goddess of life and a revenge left by the goblin god for the world, a disgusting race like psoriasis. Hannah knew all too well what goblins would do to human women, but as vassals of Master Lance, how could they just ignore it when their master was captured by the enemy? Meanwhile, Li Chen was hiding in the forest with the goblins. He hadn't left, he was waiting to see if the human troops would come out to rescue. If the rescue team was small, he would lead his men to attack and deplete the military strength within the fortress. However, after waiting for a long time, no one came out of the fortress, and the wooden door was tightly locked. Li Chen glanced at the noble young master sleeping soundly. This guy's status wasn't that great, after all. Even when captured, no one came to rescue him, unaware that the person before him was the highest ruler of the castle. Since he had already been exposed, there was no need to hide anymore. Li Chen ordered the goblins, "Go gather everyone and prepare for battle." The three leaders of the difficult encampment were still standing on the city wall, debating whether to send troops to rescue the young master, but Li Chen had already taken the initiative to lead the goblin army forward. "The enemy is coming." The soldiers in the watchtower saw a group of goblins emerging from the forest and panically sounded the alarm. The three immediately stopped arguing and looked toward the forest's edge, then gasped in shock. The goblins surged out of the forest, standing at the boundary between the woods and the farmland. Although there were only a little over 200 goblins, they all held wooden spears and formed a square formation. Among them were 20 larger goblins dressed in strange leather. It's important to note that goblins are chaotic beings. While they are social monsters, their organization is extremely weak. To be able to form a square like humans is simply unbelievable. Miss Hannah looked on in shock at this scene, and then something even more shocking happened. "Master!" A tall pillar rose up in the goblin formation, and hanging from it was the young Master Rance, whom she had been thinking about. At that moment, Rance was still in a daze, stripped of his clothes, bound at the very top of the pillar, resembling a flag made of dough. Miss Hannah's eyes turned red, and she drew her long sword, shouting to the soldiers, "Soldiers, rescue your lord! Charge with me!" However, instead of a scene of enthusiastic agreement, everyone on the city wall stared at her in disbelief. "Sister, do you want to listen to what you're saying? There are over 200 of them, and we only have a little over 70. Although most of the opposing goblins are childlike, they have only 7 armored soldiers, while the rest are just a bunch of old farmers with farming tools. To put it plainly, they belong to the South Mountain Nursing Home versus the North Sea Kindergarten. Neither side is particularly impressive. Now they hold the advantage of the city wall, standing in an invulnerable position. To abandon the wall and actively engage in battle with the enemy would be sheer madness. Knight Leo coughed. "Miss Hannah, calm down. Abandoning the wall is not a wise move. Let's observe the situation first." Miss Hannah immediately jumped up, pointing at the young Master Rance, who had become a flag. "Knight Leo, has the magic forest dulled your knightly spirit? I have never seen a knight of any kingdom remain indifferent when their lord is humiliated." In response to Miss Hannah's accusation, Knight Leo simply replied, "Well, my warhorse died of plague last month because it couldn't adapt to the forest climate. I am no longer a knight." Miss Hannah was furious, her blood boiling. Just as she was about to continue arguing, Butler Mond interrupted them. "Stop arguing, look at the goblins over there." Li Chen had raised the captured noble young master as a battle flag, hoping to humiliate the guards in the castle and lure them out to rescue him. However, the opposing side remained indifferent, standing on the city wall watching the show. He was 100% sure that this guy was not an important character at all. Even with him raised up, the castle guards showed no reaction. This guy was probably just a playboy with a bit of money who bought a nice outfit. Li Chen scratched his head, feeling helpless. He decided to attempt a feint to see how many people were in the castle. However, before attacking, he needed to distribute the equipment he had just acquired. The weapons obtained from the noble young master and his guards were a finely crafted noble longsword, name finely crafted noble longsword, weight 1.8 kilograms / speed 103 / damage 58 stab speed 92 stab damage 41 length 78 centimeters. Description: an elegant weapon highly favored by nobles, often used for ceremonial purposes but also quite good for actual combat, with better quality than ordinary swords. 2 battle swords. Name: battle sword, weight 1.5 kilograms / speed 101 / damage 51 stab speed 85 stab damage 35 length 71 centimeters. Description: a standard longsword for humans, with decent quality. 1 finely crafted noble dagger. Name: exquisite noble dagger, weight 0.3 kilograms, swing speed 127 swing damage 18 stab speed 103 stab damage 34 length 28 centimeters. Description: a tool favored by nobles, adorned with rubies. If ambushed by enemies, this will be the last resort for survival. An exquisite noble longbow. Name: exquisite noble longbow, weight 0.8 kilograms. Weapon type: longbow. Damage: 80 piercing. Ammunition: flight speed 100 meters per second. Effective range: 180 meters. Evaluation: made from very solid materials, this longbow has been crafted by a master, boasting excellent quality. In the hands of a skilled archer, it is a deadly weapon. 2 pieces of chainmail. Name: chainmail. Weight: 12 kilograms. Armor type: light armor. Body defense: 31. Shoulder defense: 21. Description: a lightweight armor with limited defense and coverage, excelling in flexibility and softness. 2 helmets. Name: helmet. Weight: 2.5 kilograms. Armor type: light head armor. Body defense: 31. Description: a lightweight helmet, a mass-produced item, commonly equipped by human regular troops. A splendid noble armed outfit. Name: splendid noble armed outfit. Weight: 2 kilograms. Armor type: light armor. Body defense: 8 shoulder defense, 8 hand defense, 8 leg defense, 8. Description: made of cotton. This Cotton armor is worn under the armor as cushioning material, providing a small amount of defense. The noble armed outfit is very exquisite and can also serve as ordinary travel. Clothing. 2 armed outfits. Name, armed outfit. Weight, 2.1 kilograms. Armor type, light armor. Body defense, 6 shoulder defense, 6 hand defense, 6 leg defense, 6 description, made of cotton. This cotton armor is worn under the armor as cushioning material, providing a small amount of defense. A pot of iron arrows, 36 pieces. Li Chen promptly stripped off his horned crocodile armor, donned the noble armed outfit, put on a piece of chainmail, and then wore the horned crocodile soft armor over the chainmail, topped with a helmet. The exquisite noble longsword, exquisite noble dagger, and exquisite noble longbow set were all stowed away, bringing his total weight to over 30 kilograms. Fortunately, with 12 points of vitality boosting him, his body was very strong, and wearing this gear only gave him a slight sense of burden. Compared to this burden, the sense of security provided by the 3 sets of armor was unparalleled, and the 3 sets of weapons maximized his output, making him a heavy infantryman capable of holding the line. There was still a set of heavy infantry equipment left. Li Chen thought for a moment and called out Gabo. Gabo, come here and kneel. Gabo, confused, still approached and knelt before Li Chen. Li Chen picked up a guard sword from the ground, drew it, and placed the sword on Gabo's head. Gabo, you fight bravely, are observant, and after discovering that the crossbow could not take the enemy's life, you shot at their face, killing 1 enemy. I reward you with a piece of chainmail, an armed outfit, a sword, and a helmet. Gabo was overjoyed, almost wanting to rush up and hug Li Chen's thigh and kiss his toes. Seeing this guy trembling on the ground without saying any words of gratitude, Li Chen waved his hand dismissively, letting him put on the equipment. Thus, Gabo became the first heavy crossbowman in Li Chen's troop, a versatile existence capable of long-range shooting and holding the line. The other goblins looked at Gabo with envy, then their gaze shifted to Li Chen, filled with desire, as there was still half a set of equipment left on the ground. Li Chen thought for a moment and pointed at Gobspear, saying, Gobspear, step forward. Gobspear was instantly delighted, sliding on his knees right in front of Li Chen. Li Chen picked up another sword, drew it, and placed the sword on Gobspear's head. Goblin Spear, you have followed me the longest, capturing crocodiles, battling scarred faces, killing leaders, with the deepest qualifications and outstanding achievements. I reward you with a sword, a helmet, and a set of armor. Goblin Spear took the equipment, his eyes filled with little stars. Although the boss liked to slap him around, the boss had him in his heart. The boss's kindness was enough to repay with a mouthful of teeth. Once the equipment was distributed, Li Chen drew his long sword and pointed it at the difficult encampment. Attack! The goblins immediately let out howls, rushing towards the city wall. Groups of goblins carried wooden ladders, trying to climb the wall. Soldiers on the wall quickly shot arrows, attempting to stop the approaching goblins. Miss Hannah on. The wall began to chant a spell, and a fireball appeared in the magic circle. The next moment, she hurled the fireball fiercely down at the goblin siege team. The fireball smashed into the goblin crowd, causing a violent explosion. Goblins directly hit by it were instantly killed, their bones and flesh blown apart, while the surrounding goblins were knocked down by the shockwave of the explosion. The nearby goblins were terrified. The sound and light of the spell explosion were frightening enough to scare the wits out of goblins who had lived their whole lives in the forest. Miss Hannah gathered a second fireball spell and smashed it down at the goblins below, knocking down several more goblins. With another loud explosion. After the second fireball, the goblins' morale plummeted. With a shout of mommy, they dropped their ladders and turned to flee. The next day at dawn, Li Chen regrouped the scattered troops from the previous night and took stock. 5 were killed in battle, 14 lightly injured, all from burns, and 1 had twisted an ankle. The fireball thrown by that monkey drunkard looked impressive, but its lethal range was small. After the flames exploded, they had no stickiness, like a lighter blowing up. If the goblins had been wearing clothes, even minor burns wouldn't have occurred. Li Chen gathered the troops and brought out the 14 injured soldiers, addressing the goblins. These 14, injured in battle, they deserve a reward. Li Chen pointed at the 20 or so wood mice captured yesterday. I reward you with reproduction. Go. The 14 injured soldiers were instantly overjoyed, not expecting that being blown up by a fireball would earn them a reward. How delightful. The other goblins, seeing this good fortune, breathed a little heavier, eager to achieve military merit immediately. Unfortunately, in the following days, Li Chen did not launch an attack due to the scarcity of engineering equipment and the presence of a mage who could throw fireballs. Li Chen did not want to rush for quick results. He planned to adopt a strategy of soft grinding and hard bargaining. It seemed that both sides were at a stalemate, but in reality, the advantage lay with Li Chen and his group. While the castle provided protection for humans, it also became a cage. Li Chen only needed to place a few spies behind the castle, while the main force kept a close watch on the city gate, effectively surrounding them. Once the garrison's food ran out, they would collapse without a fight. Li Chen had the goblins set up camp, using axes and swords to chop down nearby trees to build houses suitable for long-term habitation. Li Chen planned to establish a permanent base here. Although the wooden fortress had not yet been taken, in his eyes, it was already in his pocket. Therefore, his construction requirements were high. He wanted to dig foundations and insert large beams, aiming to turn this place into a second base. He divided the goblins into 2 teams. One team would surround the wooden fortress to prevent the townspeople from rushing out, while the other team would go hunting, seeking wood mice to breed more goblins. Days passed, and the people on the wall transformed from initial panic to extreme unease. On the first day, they saw the goblins digging pits with simple tools. On the second day, they saw the goblins erecting wooden beams in the pits. On the third day, a small wooden house was completed, and it looked quite sturdy, capable of lasting 20 to 30 years without issue. In the following days, small wooden cabins were completed, and the goblins lit bonfires, roasting the captured prey collectively every day. What shocked everyone even more was that the tallest goblin led a group of smaller goblins into the fields, teaching them how to weed and protect crops. This truly left the old farmers on the walls in disbelief. Could it be that these magical creatures could actually farm? The backdrop of the heroes' tales turned out to have such intelligence. The goblins displayed a posture of long-term residence, causing the struggling townspeople to feel extremely uneasy. Previously, they had fantasized that the goblins would retreat if they couldn't take the castle, but now they had to face reality. In a conference room of the wooden fortress, with a loud clap, Miss Hannah slammed her hand on the table. This can't go on any longer. This group of goblins clearly intends to settle here. If we continue to be trapped in the castle by them, we will have no way out. Steward Mond, how long can our food last? The old steward Mond also wore a worried expression. He pulled out a small notebook from his pocket, glanced at it, and said, "There are 2 months' worth of food left. If we cut back on supplies, it should last about 3 months. Miss Hannah looked at Sir Leo, who was sitting silently beside her. Sir Leo, we must do something. Even for our own sake, we should take action. After careful consideration, Sir Leo replied, Miss Hannah, a frontal assault is impossible. Our number of soldiers is too few. Even with all the farmers, we can muster at most 70 people, while the enemy outnumbers us 3 to 1. Of course, that doesn't mean much. They are just a bunch of unarmored goblins. Normally, we could easily cut them down, but have you noticed those 20 goblins in leather armor? They are the ones I worry about the most. 20 armored soldiers leading a group of goblins is simply beyond our capacity to resist. What should we do then? Miss Hannah asked, her face filled with helplessness. Since the war began, those 20 big goblins had always exerted tremendous pressure on everyone. Once a goblin advanced to a big goblin, their physical abilities and strength were slightly higher than that of adult males, and with armor and crossbows, taking down 2 or 3 of them was no problem. Sir Leo sighed, Miss Hannah, if the situation deteriorates to a certain extent, our only way out is to protect a portion of the people and break through the goblin encirclement, escaping from the back of the castle. We can save as many as we can. Miss Hannah could only smile bitterly at this suggestion. Not to mention that it took them nearly 30 days to arrive. They now had no supplies. Could they survive 30 days in the forest? The magical forest was a forbidden area for humans. They had come with more than 3 times the current number, and how many had died on the way due to monsters and malaria? Even if some were lucky enough to make it back to the kingdom, they would still face death. After all, Master Lance's father had participated in a failed coup. The old king spared them not out of kindness, but because of Master Lance's father's significant contributions to the kingdom, allowing them to live in the magical forest. If they dared to return to human society, it would be seen as ungrateful. Oh, speaking of Master Lance, it seemed he had been captured by the goblins for several days. Had he really turned into barbecue? Just as Miss Hannah was thinking about the unfortunate Master Lance, a soldier rushed in a panic. My lords, the goblins are escorting Master Lance to the foot of the wall. What should we do? The 3 of them widened their eyes in shock. It had been a week, and Master Lance was still alive? Surely he hadn't been turned into a puff pastry by the goblins. They immediately got up and went to the wall, where they saw several big goblins holding rough wooden shields, protecting the tallest goblin behind them on the small path by the fields. The tallest goblin held a grass rope in his hand, and our esteemed young Master Lance was being led around like a dog. Li Chen saw that the city wall was filled with people, and he yanked the grass rope hard, causing young Master Lance to let out a delicate grunt and fall to the ground, pitifully pleading for help from the crowd on the wall. Miss Hannah, Butler Mond, Knight Leo, save me from this goblin. After being captured by Li Chen, young Master Lance had been unconscious for an entire day. When he woke up, he found himself hanging on a pole like a chess piece, completely terrified, especially with goblins all around him, making him feel like he had fallen into a den of monsters. Afterward, this guy was brought to Li Chen's side. Li Chen wanted to ask him for some information, but the guy was screaming in fear, babbling in an unknown language that sounded to Li Chen like the ramblings of Crazy Dave, completely incomprehensible. Li Chen planned to make use of this person's last value, cosplay as the King Louis XVI, to put some pressure on the people in the castle. Young master! Miss Hannah cried out in despair, seeing her young master turned into a toy for the monsters. Heartbroken, she immediately wanted to go down and save him, but was stopped by Knight Leo. Miss Hannah, calm down. The despicable goblins want to lure you down to weaken our strength. Do you see those big goblins at the edge of the forest? Their bows and crossbows are all drawn. Miss Hannah glanced at the edge of the forest and realized that several big goblins were ready for battle, glaring at the wooden fortress. Butler Mon suggested, Miss Hannah, don't you know language magic? This guy brought the young master here probably intending to say something. Why not listen to what he has to say? Miss Hannah nodded, and at that moment, Li Chen's voice came through. Humans inside. Is there anyone who can speak Goblin? Come out and be a translator. Or this guy is going to cosplay as Louis XVI. Li Chen drew his sword, kicked young Master Lance's leg joint, sending him back to his knees, and then placed the sword against his neck. Young Master Lance screamed in fear. 9 lives. I don't want to be eaten by goblins. Miss Hannah was furious. Stop it, you damned goblin. Don't be disrespectful to our lord. A clear female voice reached Li Chen's ears, and it was a language he could understand. Li Chen was astonished. Upon looking at the wall, he realized it was the monkey who was speaking, and it made sense. Translation magic was a standard feature in another world. Moreover, the content being spoken on the other side. So you're the lord, huh? Damn, I thought you were just a minor character. Thank you for the reminder, Miss Mage. Turns out I've caught a big fish. Li Chen let out a laugh that could only be produced by devouring a soul elder every day, causing Miss Hannah's face to turn pale as she realized she had done something foolish. Knight Leo and Butler Mon noticed Miss Hannah's pale complexion and, not knowing what she had said to that goblin, urged her to translate. After stammering through the translation, both of them changed their expressions, looking at Miss Hannah as if she were an idiot. Damn, the goblin had no idea it had captured the number 1 figure in the castle. You just leaked the answer to them. How adorable, little piggy girl. However, this was not the time for mutual accusations. Knight Leo said firmly, Miss Hannah, I am now the highest military commander of the castle. From now on, do not say anything unrelated to translation. I will say one sentence, and you will translate it. Ask that goblin who he is and why he is invading our territory. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Miss Hannah nodded, not daring to make any further movements, and immediately translated Knight Leo's words. After hearing Miss Hannah's translation, Li Chen burst into laughter. Humans, what do you mean I'm invading your territory? The magical forest has belonged to us monsters since ancient times. It's you humans who are the invaders, right? Isn't it our duty as monsters to kill and expel you invaders? This left Miss Hannah dumbfounded. It was the first time she had been accused of being an invader by a monster, and it felt so bizarre. But thinking about it, as humans, they had indeed intruded into the magical forest to build a castle, so they really were invaders. Miss Hannah awkwardly translated this for the two, who also looked bewildered. After a moment of silence, Knight Leo said, Tell him we can guard the castle until we die. His attack is meaningless. Li Chen, upon hearing the translation, spat a thick phlegm towards the castle. What the hell? You guys came from afar to build a castle in the magical forest, and you probably didn't bring much food, right? I reckon you have at most 2 months worth of supplies left. You might as well starve to death. Knight Leo's expression changed. He hadn't expected this goblin to accurately guess their food reserves. He bluffed, not 2 months, in 1 month our reinforcements will arrive, and by then you and your monster army will vanish into thin air among the kingdom's iron troops. Miss Hannah translated this, which made Li Chen fall silent. If these people really had reinforcements, the situation would be dire. It wouldn't take many, just 50 armored soldiers, and he would have to scurry back to base with the goblins. Li Chen had too little information. He was skeptical about these people's origins. One suspicion was that they had made a mistake and were exiled to the forest by the human mainstream world, while another was that it was a large-scale policy by the human empire to migrate and cultivate the forest. If it was the latter, then the magical forest surely had more than just this wooden castle. There must be more human castles under construction, which would put him in danger. Even if he quickly took down the wooden castle, he would have to abandon it. Otherwise, when the other human armies arrived, he would be trapped in the castle. However, all's fair in war. Who knows if this monkey is just bluffing? So he chose words that would benefit his side. Hey, are you kidding me? You smelly potatoes and rotten eggs. Didn't you just make a mistake and get exiled to this place by the human kingdom? What are you pretending for? I've led people through 100 miles around here, and besides you, there are no other human castles. You are completely isolated. As he spoke, he tightened his grip around young Master Lance's neck, making him gasp for breath. Li Chen's expression also turned ferocious. Listen up, humans in the castle. Standing before you is the Goblin King, the enslaver of all races, the scourge of the world, the destroyer of gods, the one true master of the magical forest, Arthur Louis Romanoff Qin Shi Huang. Now, open the gates and bow before my feet, and I will spare your lives and reward you by making you my servants. In negotiations, isn't it all about boasting? Just look at how many titles he has thrown out. Even the monkey on the wall was left dumbfounded. The wall fell into a long silence, and finally, the monkey managed to say, Let's talk about the conditions for releasing young Master Lance. Now that they had gotten to the point, Li Chen released his grip on young Master Lance's neck, allowing him to kneel on the ground and cough. He was thinking about what he could exchange for this guy. This fellow named Lance should be important to the people in the castle, but being important doesn't necessarily mean he was crucial, putting him in a sort of Schrodinger's importance state, so he couldn't ask for too much. Otherwise, if the other side gave up on him, he would get nothing. A few minutes later, Li Chen spoke. 100 axes, 100 hoes, in exchange for your lord's life. Now the three on the wall fell silent. After several minutes, Miss Hannah refused. Impossible. We will not provide any iron tools to you monsters. The other party responded firmly. Li Chen's troops had limited ironware, and providing so much at once would significantly enhance the enemy's combat capability. Even if they managed to rescue young Master Lance, they wouldn't last long. In that case, it would be better not to negotiate at all, as they could at least survive for a while in the castle. Li Chen kicked young Master Lance hard, sending him sprawling on the ground. You're useless, aren't you? Have you been cutting your subordinates' wages all this time? You wouldn't even be willing to trade your life for 100 axes and 100 hoes. You're a complete failure. Young Master Lance cried out in pain and hurriedly shouted towards the city wall. Miss Hannah, what are you talking to this guy about? Don't provoke him any further. Whatever he wants, just give it to him. Quickly, make him let me go. Miss Hannah was in a difficult position, and Knight Leo whispered, don't engage with the young master for now. The less we seem to care about him, the lower the price they'll offer. Trust me on this. Miss Hannah thought for a moment and decided to ignore young Master Lance's cries. Seeing that even the adorable Miss Hannah was ignoring him, young Master Lance felt utterly hopeless, thinking they were going to abandon him. He cried and shouted the names of familiar people in the castle, hoping they would come to his rescue. The people on the castle wall looked on with pity. After all, he was their sworn lord, now kneeling below and begging desperately, while they remained indifferent on the wall. It was truly a disgrace. Moreover, the 100 axes and 100 hoes that the enemy demanded, they actually had plenty. When they arrived, there were over 300 of them, bringing more than 300 sets of axes and hoes, along with other tools. Young Master Lance had nearly spent all his possessions on clearing tools, thinking he would be far from human society. However, they hadn't anticipated the dangers of the monster forest. Out of the more than 300 people, fewer than 100 survived upon reaching the exile site, and the surplus tools were all locked away in the warehouse. Now, because they were concerned about the goblins' enhanced combat power with ironware, they couldn't bring out the tools to exchange for young Master Lance's life, which made them feel ashamed. Li Chen and the other party were at a stalemate for quite a while. They were unwilling to provide him with ironware and pretended not to care about young Master Lance, only offering 10 bags of food and a seemingly precious but utterly useless glass cup in exchange for him. Li Chen was fed up with their antics and shouted, do you think I'm a 3-year-old? Trading a broken glass cup for a lord's life? Are you kidding me? There was a long silence from the castle. After Li Chen cursed several times without a response, he was furious. But as he fumed, a light bulb went off in his head. And he had an idea. Li Chen pulled young Master Lance up from the ground, gently patting his face while wearing a meaningful smile. Young Master Lance tensed up, about to plead for mercy, but Li Chen had his men hold him down and pulled out his right arm. Li Chen drew his sword, gesturing several times at his arm as if to chop it off. Young Master Lance screamed in terror, and the people on the wall began to stir. Miss Hannah shouted even louder, stop. Don't harm young Master Lance. Li Chen chuckled, don't worry, I won't take his life. At most, I'll take away his little finger. After that, I'll let him go. The people on the wall were somewhat confused. What did it mean to let young Master Lance go after taking away his little finger? The one who understood the situation the fastest was Butler Mond, whose expression changed instantly. He realized what the goblin leader was planning and broke out in a cold sweat. Was this really a goblin? To come up with such a vicious scheme was truly malicious. Li Chen smiled and said, when your young Master Lance loses his little finger, he will suffer, despair, and rage. When I put him back, he will hear that his vassals were unwilling to exchange 100 axes and 100 hoes for his life, causing him to lose his 5-fingered girl. Can you guess how much he will hate you? I can't wait to see how he will treat you when he returns. The 3 people in the castle turned pale upon hearing Miss Hannah's translation, especially Knight Leo, who trembled visibly. Damn it, this goblin is ruthless, hitting him right where it hurts. If Lord Lance returns missing a hand, having heard that he was the one who refused to give the goblin axes and hoes, causing him to lose an arm, he figures Lord Lance will execute him on the spot. What if we just give him what he wants? Lord's life is at stake. Knight Leo stammered. Yes, Lord's life is more important. I'll immediately send someone to pick out 100 of the most worn-out axes and hoes to give to this monster. Saving the Lord comes first. Butler Mond quickly chimed in, having previously suggested not to rescue the Lord when he was kidnapped. Now, he was eager to show his willingness, fearing that he might end up wearing shoes 2 sizes too small. Miss Hannah looked at their behavior with exasperation. When the Lord's life was in danger, they were indifferent, but now that it concerned them, they were all jumping higher than each other. Fortunately, the Lord could return, that was what mattered. Miss Hannah hurriedly shouted to Li Chen, "Stop! Don't harm Lord Lance. We agree to your demands. But why should we trust that you will keep your promise?" Li Chen, satisfied, sheathed his knife and gave Lord Lance 2 hard slaps, knocking a tooth out. "Miss, you need to understand, it's not me begging you, it's you begging me. Now, immediately bring me what I want, and take your useless lord away, or I will return the battle-damaged lord to you and let him bite you to death." With no other choice, the people in the castle could only throw 100 axes and 100 hoes over the castle wall. Li Chen sent someone to retrieve these precious iron tools, then kicked Lord Lance in the backside and laughed heartily as he returned to the forest. Lord Lance was finally free, crying pitifully as he ran to the castle wall and shouted, "Open the door! Let me in! Please let me in!" The wooden door opened a small crack, and Lord Lance squeezed through, greeted by Miss Hannah and the others. He rushed up, clinging to Miss Hannah like a large gecko, hanging onto her as he cried loudly, his tears and snot all over her. Miss Hannah felt a bit disgusted but still gently stroked his hair. "Lord Lance, you are safe now," Knight Leo interjected. "Lord Lance, after our struggle with these monsters, we finally rescued you. Thankfully, your life is safe, otherwise, it would be hard for us to atone for our failure." Butler Mon took off his coat and draped it over the bare Lord Lance, his old face beaming with joy. "Don't worry, Lord Lance, everything is fine now, we will protect you. Mina-san, it's so good to have everyone here." "Woo woo woo," Lord Lance cried uncontrollably, and the 3 present comforted him in unison, creating a scene of a wise lord and loyal ministers. However, where Lord Lance couldn't see, the 3 exchanged glances, each noticing the guilt in the other's eyes. Having obtained a large number of tools, Li Chen was overjoyed. At this moment, he didn't care about the struggling humans in difficult camp. He had only one thought: construction. Construction, and more construction. Except for the big goblin still monitoring the humans in difficult camp, all the other goblins began to work. Li Chen had them chop down trees, dig up roots, and process the felled trees on the spot into building materials to be used for beams underground, while the cleared land was dug up to plant the brought potatoes. Once all the goblins had their own shelters, Li Chen had a pit dug underground, where a large amount of wood was thrown in, set ablaze, and then covered with mud. The next day, when they dug it open, it was filled with black charcoal. With the charcoal ready, Li Chen immediately set up a kiln. He walked along the riverbank and found clay, which he used to mold pottery. Making pottery wasn't particularly difficult. One could shape the clay into the desired form, fire it up in the furnace, and thus obtain pottery. If the first firing failed and the pottery cracked, it didn't matter. One could crush the failed pottery into powder and mix it with the clay for the second firing, significantly increasing the success rate. That day, Li Chen successfully fired a batch of pottery, including pots, bowls, and pans. He lined up the cooking pots and gathered all the goblins together. Holding a ceramic bowl, Li Chen excitedly shouted to the goblins in a news channel tone, "Brothers, from now on, we are stepping out of the savage era of eating raw meat and blood into the age of cooked food. This is a small step for the tribe, but a giant leap for the goblin race. Although you may not yet understand what this means, it doesn't matter. Time will prove everything. Today, you don't have to work, eat as much as you can." At his command, the goblins plunged into a sea of joy. Following Li Chen's instructions, they lit bonfires, set up ceramic pots, poured in water, and added fresh meat and vegetables to cook. From that day on, the goblins under Li Chen's command would never return to eating raw food. Anyone caught consuming raw food or water would be punished with a whipping. The people on the city walls silently watched the cheering goblins, unsure of what had gotten into them. For the past few days, the goblins had not attacked the castle. They had been busy chopping trees and digging pits for construction, pushing the edge of the forest further back and building more goblin huts, creating the semblance of a small village. The speed of goblin construction left them astonished. In less than a month, the goblins had built a small village, while for humans, it would require a massive amount of funds and food, with the lord and his steward working day and night to manage the population just to achieve a project of similar scale. Miss Hannah, Steward Mond, and Knight Leo stood on the city wall, their expressions grim as they stared at the goblin village. Those rascals had been making noise since early morning, making them tense, and they thought the goblins were about to launch an attack. Instead, they were throwing a party, cooking meat soup, and the smell of the meat wafted over, making the few who hadn't eaten well in days feel uncomfortable. Did the goblins cook this well? They had discovered a critical problem in recent days. Compared to the food that could last 3 months, they had run out of water. At the beginning of the castle's construction, they had only thought about defending against monster attacks and hadn't considered being besieged by enemies, so they hadn't thought about a water source. Now, after being surrounded by goblins for over a month, their drinking water had been completely consumed, and every day they relied on Miss Hannah to use magic to condense water elements. Miss Hannah had now turned into a human water dispenser, either using magic to create water elements or waiting for her magic to recover to continue making water. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. Tired, Miss Hannah sniffed the air. She could smell that the meat soup being cooked on the other side contained a lot of ingredients: rabbit Meat, deer meat, carrots, onions, a rich pot of meat soup that made her mouth water uncontrollably. Damn it! What are these bastards up to, making a racket so early in the morning? Are they celebrating the Festival of Light? Steward Mons swallowed hard as he caught the scent of vegetables in the air. Our food is running low, and without fresh vegetables, I've been constipated for a long time. Sir Raymond lamented, without fresh meat, the soldiers will grow weaker and weaker. If the goblins launch an attack, the soldiers won't even be able to lift their weapons. And ever since the young master was rescued, he hasn't stepped outside. He's become a nervous wreck. Sigh. The three of them sighed. After being rescued, young Master Raymond had become neurotic, hiding in his little room and afraid to come out. The highest leader of the castle was in such a state, which led to a very low morale among the people in the castle. Just as everyone was feeling emo, they suddenly saw a big goblin walking over, which made their hearts race again. The goblin spear walked straight to the base of the wall and shouted up to the humans, "Hey, is there a female human who can speak Goblin? Our boss has something to ask you." Miss Hannah was taken aback and translated this to the other two. The three exchanged glances, and Miss Hannah asked, "What does your leader want to know?" The boss said, "Today is a day worth commemorating. The goblins have crossed from one era into another. I don't understand what that means, but just tell me what date it is today. This date will go into the goblin textbook." The three looked at each other in confusion. What on earth was that about? Miss Hannah felt that this question didn't involve life or death, so she replied, "Today is the 20th of April, 4352 in the era of the gods." The goblin spear stood there for a few minutes memorizing the string of numbers, then he picked up a bag and waved it at the people on the wall. "Our boss says he wants to make a trade, 1 bag of vegetables for a set of writing tools." "Ha? Goblins want writing tools? Is the world really going crazy?" The three looked at the bag of food, swallowing their saliva like mad. As Butler Mond had said, they hadn't eaten vegetables in a long time. Without dietary fiber and only eating black bread, it wouldn't be long before they couldn't relieve themselves, and even the beautiful Miss Hannah had developed pigmentation issues because of it. As the three hesitated, the goblin spear grew a bit impatient. "Are you going to trade or not? Just give me a straight answer. The boss said you humans are just dragging things out." "In the great name of the Goblin King, the enslaver of all races, the scourge of the world, the destroyer of gods, the sole legitimate master of the magical forest, Arthur Louis Romanoff, and Qinshi Huang, he promises there's no poison in the vegetables, so hurry up. I'm waiting to go back and eat." In the end, old Butler Mond threw down a set of writing tools over the wall in exchange for the vegetables. Later, after testing, they found that the vegetables were indeed not poisoned, so a few high-ranking officials divided the vegetables among themselves, which slightly alleviated their constipation. As for the ordinary farmers, they couldn't care less, they were just stuck. The goblin spear ran back to the camp, handed the writing tools to Li Chen, and then ran off to show off his meal. Li Chen spread out the parchment and began to draw with a quill dipped in ink. He was planning the future capital of the Goblin Empire. Li Chen sketched a simple city plan on the parchment, including the road system, drainage system, farmland area, livestock area, and even a commercial area. He decided to develop a large town based on the difficult settlement. There was a reason humans chose this location. The terrain around was flat and the soil loose. As long as the big trees were cleared, a large amount of arable land could be obtained. It was not far from the Great River, about 200 meters away, and could develop into a port city in the later stages, with a very advantageous geographical position. More importantly, humans had already cultivated a circle of land surrounding the wooden fortress, and the food produced from these lands would be enough for Li Chen's troops for a long time without needing to hunt, allowing the labor force at hand to focus on construction. After completing the simple plan, Li Chen walked out of the wooden house, holding a wooden spear, while the goblin work team followed behind with axes and hoes, bustling along. Li Chen began to draw lines on the ground, and wherever he drew, the goblins started to dig. The squares he drew were transformed into houses by the goblins, and the straight lines became sewers. With ample food, the goblins worked at an astonishing speed. What delighted Li Chen even more was that the first nest of goblin pups had nearly 200 goblins born. He dispatched 10 goblins to manage the goblin pups and moved them to the nursery. The nursery was dry and warm, and every day, each goblin pup could enjoy a thick meat soup made from a mix of meat and vegetables. With such rich nutritional support, the growth rate of the goblin pups was further enhanced, often allowing them to be pulled from the nursery to participate in production and construction within just 10 days. With the new population joining, Li Chen began to implement a major project. He noticed that after overseeing the construction of many wooden houses in recent days, his engineering skill proficiency was rising significantly, quickly, approaching 25 points. The first dual-choice skill of the project, cement, caught Li Chen's attention. He wanted to quickly raise his engineering proficiency to 25 to unlock this skill point. To this end, he initiated a special project, first sending people to dig ditches in the fields, then having the goblins cut down trees in large quantities and drill holes in the wood to preset rivet holes. Once all the wooden parts were processed, though somewhat rough, they were sufficient. When all the wooden components were Completed, Li Chen led a team down to the river to install them. The nearby waters were also inhabited by horned crocodiles, which seemed to occupy the ecological niche along the riverbank, making them visible everywhere, causing considerable difficulties for those wanting to work in the river. However, it was not a problem. Li Chen sent the big goblins, wearing horned crocodile armor, to carry out the work. The armor would confuse the horned crocodiles, making them think the goblins were their own kind, thus their project proceeded very smoothly. Several large wooden beams were laboriously driven into the riverbed, and then Li Chen operated on the beams, stacking the previously made wooden tools, slowly forming a massive wooden structure. The project lasted nearly 15 days, and the first wave of newly born goblin pups had fully grown into adults, with 218 out of 237 successfully surviving, a very high survival rate. Li Chen assigned the older goblins to lead the younger ones, distributing them into work groups to become the new productive force of the tribe, further increasing Li Chen's construction speed. The humans on the city walls watched as the forest's edge receded, with more and more land being cultivated, more houses being built on the land, and numerous goblins working and living on it, all of them lost in confusion. Was this world accelerated? So much construction, how could it be completed in such a short time by a group of monsters? What left them even more bewildered was that the big goblins had been working in the river recently. At first, they couldn't see what the big goblins were installing in the water, but as time went on, an old farmer with a hoe shouted, "By the light of the gods, a water wheel! They are installing a water wheel!" Everyone felt a wave of absurdity. A water wheel was a very complex device. How could goblins possibly make a water wheel? Moreover, it appeared to be a large water wheel, towering 4 to 5 meters high, capable of directly delivering water to the shore. Impossible. They are just monsters. How could they build a water wheel? Impossible. Impossible. Miss Hannah shook her head frantically, cursing the absurdity in her heart. They were goblins, not humans. They were just mindless monsters, surrounded by goblins. In the city, tormented daily by fear and scarce resources, they had become somewhat deranged. Now, seeing the goblins complete projects that only humans could accomplish, they felt both panic and a crumbling sense of pride in being human. If even goblins could do what humans could do, then what were they? The inexplicable competitive spirit drove Miss Hannah to make the round trip between the city wall and her little wooden cabin 10 times a day, as she eagerly anticipated the failure of the goblins' water wheel project. When the second wave of over 300 goblin pups grew old enough to work, Li Chen's water wheel project was officially completed. A massive circular wheel stood upright in the river, turning with the flow of water, which was lifted high and then poured down. The water was caught by wooden channels elevated on wooden frames that stretched 200 meters to the land, directing the water into a grid-like irrigation system. An old farmer, witnessing this, gasped in astonishment. "We have irrigation channels. We can water the land anytime, and the crop yield will increase by at least 20%. The old farmer trembled all over, and to his surprise, envy flickered in his eyes, an actual human envying goblins. In contrast, Miss Hannah looked dejected, murmuring to herself, "Impossible, impossible, they are just goblins, they are just goblins." Meanwhile, after the water wheel and irrigation system were completed, Li Chen gave the goblins a day off, and they indulged in feasting once again. Li Chen felt that this group of goblins was incredibly simple-minded. As long as they were well-fed, with the occasional 3-for-1 kill, they would complete his tasks 100% without any slacking off. Goblins truly were so simple-minded. Li Chen opened his personal attribute panel. After completing the water wheel, his engineering skill proficiency reached 23, just 2 points away from unlocking a choice-based minor skill. His gaze turned to the wooden fortress, a glint of coldness in his eyes. With 2 waves of goblin pups born, his forces had reached 600, and with 3-for-1 kills at 0, it was time to firmly grasp what was rightfully his. Li Chen immediately initiated a new project, dividing the goblins into 3 teams, one to monitor the human castle, another to chop wood, and the third to dig the foundation. Once they dug the foundation to a certain depth, tall wooden beams were driven into the ground, and the goblins extended upwards using a riveting structure. Li Chen aimed to create tall arrow towers that could directly strike the houses within the wooden walls. 4 arrow towers were erected at the corners of the castle. Once completed, they could indiscriminately target any objective within the fortress. This left the townspeople in despair, with no way to counter the growing number of goblins, which had already reached 6 times their own numbers. They could only watch as the 4 wooden towers grew taller by the day. Finally, after the third wave of goblin pups was born, the 9-meter-tall arrow tower was completed. Li Chen climbed the tower with a longbow, having someone bring a fire basin to his side. He picked up a specially made wooden arrow, its tip wrapped in dry grass, soaked in oil rendered from hunted animals' fat, mixed with some flammable resin. He placed the arrowhead in the fire basin to ignite it, glancing at the panicked and chaotic wooden fortress before drawing his longbow and shooting. The flaming arrow was launched at a steep angle, traveling over 200 meters and striking the roof of a house covered in hay. The flames ignited the hay, and the fire spread instantly, engulfing the entire roof of the small house. Fire! Fire! The soldiers on the lookout tower of the wooden fortress were horrified, ringing the alarm bell with a clanging sound, while the people inside rushed to extinguish the flames. However, surrounded by goblins, there was hardly any water left in the fortress, and after a frantic rescue effort, they only managed to prevent the fire from spreading. That wooden house was still burned down. Everyone's faces were blackened, and many suffered burns, looking utterly disheveled. This was just from one arrow. If the enemy had filled all 4 arrow towers with archers and shot simultaneously, they would all be burned to death. What to do? What to do? Think of a way quickly. Miss Hannah shouted anxiously, trying to get the other 2 to think of a way out, but Knight Leo just stood there with a gloomy expression, and Butler Mond was only sighing repeatedly. Knight Leo helplessly said, "There's no way out. The 4 arrow towers set up by the enemy have us completely in their sights, and with their forces increasing so rapidly, they have completely surrounded the castle. We have nowhere to go." Miss Hannah's face turned pale. "Is there really no way out? Is this our end?" Knight Leo nodded helplessly and drew the dagger from his waist, handing it to Miss Hannah. "At least you still have time to decide your own fate. Miss Hannah, you are a woman, I don't need to tell you what will happen if you are captured by goblins. Sigh, may you return to the realm of the light god." Miss Hannah trembled as she took the dagger. She really didn't want to die. As one of the top 10 students at the Kingdom's Magic Academy, she should have had a bright future, yet here she was, about to take her own life in this desolate magical forest. How did it come to this? Tears streamed down her face as she shakily pressed the dagger against her neck, while Knight Leo and Butler Mond closed their eyes in sorrow. Between life and death lies great terror. Miss Hannah hesitated to take her own life, feeling uneasy after several attempts. In the end, she put down the dagger, contemplating whether to go back and drink some potion to end it all. At that moment, the goblins surrounding the castle stirred, and a big goblin approached the wall, holding a shield. "Goblin!" Spear shouted loudly, "Is there a female who speaks Goblin here? Our boss says he's giving you a chance to surrender, which could save your lives." Miss Hannah was taken aback and instinctively translated this for the other 2. The other 2 also breathed a little heavier. They were all human and didn't want to die, even if the one making the promise was a goblin. They still wanted to see if there was a chance. Miss Hannah approached the wall and asked tremulously, "What did your leader say?" Goblin Spear shouted, "The boss said our forces are 6 times yours, and we can burn the wooden fortress to ashes at any time. Taking your lives is just a thought away. But this wooden fortress is built quite well, and he doesn't want to destroy it. You humans are also important labor. You can become the boss's slaves, helping him with work. Those who possess knowledge will gain higher power, and your lives will be guaranteed." Miss Hannah translated this to the others, and Knight Leo said, "Ask him how he will guarantee our safety." Miss Hannah inquired as instructed, and Goblin Spear scratched his head, mimicking the boss's tone. "Humans, I'll screw your fairy. Surrender or not. Just give a straightforward answer. The boss said if you don't surrender before lunch, he'll fire rockets and turn you all into roasted pigs. If you want to surrender, throw your armor and weapons down from the wall. Oh, and especially for the magical human females, you must throw down your staffs. The boss wants to see them." After discussing among themselves, Miss Hannah said, "You must guarantee that you won't harm the women." Goblin Spear turned to leave. "Whether you surrender or not, I'm out of here. It's annoying to drag this out, making it seem like I'm begging you." Goblin Spear turned and walked away, looking as if he couldn't be bothered to say another word. He didn't understand why the boss, who could easily take care of these humans, would bother to negotiate. Wouldn't it be more enjoyable to just burn them and have a feast? The 3 on the wall watched Goblin Spear walk away, feeling a wave of melancholy. Should they really surrender? After all, they were goblins, and goblins were everywhere in this world. Their crimes were well known, and many human villages that had been robbed by goblins were left in horrific states, especially the goblin nests that had been eradicated, where the rescued women had suffered terribly. Could they really trust goblins, who would eat people without spitting out the bones? The 3 of them couldn't come up with an answer, but there was no way out. Time passed second by second, and it was clear that the deadline set by the goblins was approaching. Some goblins had already climbed up to the arrow tower, preparing to launch fire arrows at them. At that moment, the frail and weary young Master Lance emerged from the room. He approached the 3 and said, "Miss Hannah, Butler Mond, Knight Leo, let's surrender." The 3 were taken aback and hurriedly asked about young Master Lance's condition. He shook his head. "You 3, when my father failed in the coup, His Majesty the King gave us a choice: immediate execution or exile to the magical forest. We all chose the magical forest. Who doesn't know that coming to the magical forest is a matter of life and death? Yet we still chose to come, didn't we? It was all for a chance at survival, right? What's the difference between now and then? It's just that asking for life from His Majesty has turned into asking for life from the goblins. Our lives are now in the enemy's hands again. It's better to continue to show submission. Even if there's only a 10% chance of survival, living is always better than dying, isn't it?" Sigh. Upon hearing this, the 3 felt as if their last strength had drained away, tearing away the final veil of dignity. Li Chen saw that the time was almost up, and the humans still showed no signs of surrendering. He picked up a wooden arrow again, lit it in the brazier, and drew his bow. Li Chen thought it was a pity to burn down such a wooden fortress. If left intact, it could be used to store food. But since they wouldn't surrender, there was no choice but to burn it down and rebuild. Just as Li Chen was about to shoot, he suddenly heard the human soldiers on the wall shouting something loudly, as if trying to attract his attention. He turned his gaze that way, and the human soldiers began to remove their armor, swords, and throw them down to the ground below the wall. Next were the farmers, who tossed their axes and hoes down. And then came Miss Hannah, who reluctantly caressed the magical inscriptions on her staff before resolutely throwing it down from the wall. Knight Leo struggled to remove all his armor and threw it down, and finally, he lingered over a very long great sword, taking a long time to let it go. He knew that from now on, this companion that had accompanied him in battle would no longer belong to him. Seeing that the people on the wall had almost thrown down their weapons, Li Chen let out a hearty laugh, descended from the arrow tower, and shouted to Goblin Spear, send someone to collect the weapons. Goblin Spear responded and led a few goblins to the base of the wall to gather the weapons. With the loss of these items, the humans had no power to resist and became lambs for slaughter. A few minutes later, the city gate was opened, and the humans inside the wooden fortress hesitantly walked out, led by a group of men, followed by women, who surrounded the children in the middle. Li Chen scanned the scene. There were 73 male humans, 21 females, and 3 children, all under 10 years old. Li Chen was very satisfied with their surrender, waved his hand, and the goblins rushed up with grass ropes to bind their hands. The people instinctively tried to resist, but the goblins immediately raised their bows, crossbows, and spears, threatening them with growls like beasts. The people, frightened, could only allow the goblins to tie them up. After binding the men, the goblins began to tie up the women. At this moment, some goblins became unruly, breathing heavily with bloodshot eyes, making creepy laughter while pulling and tugging at the human women, causing them to scream in panic. Seeing this, Miss Hannah shouted angrily at Li Chen, Goblin Chief, you are untrustworthy. You promised to protect our lives. Li Chen glanced at her, drew his sword, and pointed it at those goblins who were tugging at the human women. Disobeying military orders, kill. The big goblins surged forward in an instant, and about 10 goblins binding human women were killed with screams. The human women were startled, huddling together and trembling. Li Chen surveyed the scene with his sword, and the new generation of goblins present shivered in fear, all lowering their heads. Li Chen said coldly, "Here, my orders are authority, they are absolute, they are the life creed that you must obey even if it costs you your life. What I say is not allowed is not allowed. What I say must be done even if it means death. Those who disobey will die." The goblins present were too frightened to utter a word. Li Chen snorted coldly, sheathed his sword, and waved his hand. A new group of goblins stepped forward to bind the human women, and this time no one dared to make any excessive movements. Miss Hannah felt relieved and then looked at Li Chen with a strange gaze. This goblin was peculiar. The aura he exuded was completely different from the chaotic atmosphere radiating from the surrounding goblins. Rather than a monster, he seemed more like a human. Once the binding work was completed, Li Chen had a wooden chair brought over. He casually sat on the chair and said to Miss Hannah, "Have your people kneel and show submission to your supreme master." You. Being humiliated like this, anger flashed across Miss Hannah's face. Knight Leo tugged at her clothing, signaling her to look at the goblins eyeing them hungrily. Only then did Miss Hannah realize that they were now prisoners and could only translate truthfully. The crowd, upon hearing Miss Hannah's translation, exchanged glances, and seeing the spears and crossbows pointed at them, they could only kneel down in a flurry. Li Chen beckoned to Miss Hannah with his finger. "Come here." Miss Hannah, full of vigilance, took a step back, clutching her chest. Seeing this, Li Chen mockingly asked, "Beautiful sorceress, what is your name?" "Ha, Hannah de Aining." "Very good, Miss Hannah. From now on, I appoint you as my exclusive translator. From now on, when I say within 3 meters, you must immediately comply and come within 3 meters of me, obeying my orders. Otherwise, I will kill your people. Now, within 3 meters. Miss Hannah shivered all over. Did he want her to stand next to this big goblin? She felt that this big goblin would pounce on her and do something outrageous in the next second. She really didn't dare to move. Seeing that she made no move, Li Chen took out a crossbow and aimed it at the kneeling young master lance. Miss Hannah was instantly alarmed and took several big steps to stand next to Li Chen, joining the group of goblins, making her feel as if she had stepped into a den of monsters, with goosebumps rising all over her body. Li Chen let out a satisfied grunt, lowered the crossbow, and said loudly, "All humans present, listen well. I am the Goblin King, the enslaver of all races, the scourge of the world, the destroyer of gods, the sole legitimate master of the magical forest, Arthur Louis Romanoff Qin Shi Huang. From now on, you are my slaves, my property, my currency. In my kingdom, only those of value can survive, and value is also ranked. The lowest value is labor, and the highest value is knowledge and technology. The questions I will ask next will determine your status, so you must think carefully before answering. Of course, do not lie, or you will die a miserable death. Now tell me, who among you is an expert in smelting, including finding minerals, smelting iron, or simply being a blacksmith. Those who possess the above skills, step forward. After saying this, Li Chen elbowed Miss Hannah in the stomach, signaling her to translate. Miss Hannah took a step back in disgust and hurriedly began to translate. The crowd exchanged glances, and an old man pulled a young man forward, who was kneeling. Goblin Lord, my son and I are the blacksmiths of Lord Lance's household. We know how to forge swords and armor, and we can also build blast furnaces for smelting iron. We know a bit about finding iron in coal mines as well. After speaking, the two looked at Li Chen with anxious expressions. Li Chen was overjoyed. Talents. SSR talents. He pointed at the two and roared at the other goblins. From now on, these two will be the core members of the tribe. Anyone who dares to harm them will die. After saying this, he stepped forward, personally helped the two up, untied them, and had them stand aside. He glanced back at Miss Hannah. Within 3 meters, Miss Hannah was taken aback and reluctantly walked over to his side. Li Chen pointed at the blacksmith father and son and said to Miss Hannah, tell them to work hard for me, and their lives will get sweeter in the future. Miss Hannah twitched her lips, feeling that this sounded a bit like the promises made by the big merchants in the royal capital to their subordinates. Miss Hannah translated Li Chen's words to the two, who felt both joy and worry, thinking that they finally had a future. Next, Li Chen found many more talents, including but not limited to brewing, carpentry, sericulture, papermaking, and leatherworking. They were all carefully selected by young Master Lance, each mastering a skill, and Li Chen painted a bright future for them, encouraging them to work hard. Of course, there were also useless ones, like the 7 professional soldiers and a knight named Leo, who stood at 1.9 meters tall. These guys didn't know anything. Li Chen asked Knight Leo what he could do if he had any special production skills, and the guy said he could fight. After saying this, he puffed up his chest muscles, which could compete in the Olympics. In his view, if the goblins could even reuse old farmers, wouldn't he be promoted to a great general? Little did he know, Li Chen waved his hand. This guy and his 7 soldiers will be the lowest slaves, and they'll dig ditches and clean out latrines in the future. What are you so proud of when you can't do anything? After all the humans announced their submission, Li Chen heard the system's notification sound in his ear. Ding! You have achieved victory. Enemies killed, 7 captured enemies, 97 experience gained, 520 own casualties, 18 loot obtained, grains x35, sides x28, logging axes x25, hose x19, daggers x11, armed swords x8, rags x17, tattered armored clothes x8, helmets x5, tattered chainmail x1. Dinars gained, 3,890 ding. The owner of Hardship Camp has changed. Now Hardship Camp belongs to you. Hardship Camp Prosperity, 280. Please choose your attitude towards Hardship Camp. 1. Forgive, 2. Plunder, 3. Completely destroy. Li Chen looked at the word plunder. According to the Mountain Blade system, if he clicked plunder, the castle would suffer some degree of damage and he would receive a lot of plundered resources and dinars. It sounded quite tempting, but doing so would significantly reduce prosperity. Currently, the castle's prosperity was 280, which was already very low. Normally, it should be over 1,000. Li Chen planned to develop this place as a base, so he chose to forgive. After making his choice, the system presented another option. Would you like to rename the fortress? Li Chen clicked yes, and the system brought up an input box. After thinking for a moment, he typed Goblin Fortress in the input box with his mind. Ding! Hardship Camp has been renamed Goblin Fortress. Just like that, Li Chen acquired his first castle. He opened the castle management page, clicked on Garrison, and saw that Goblin Fortress had a garrison capacity of 80 people, meaning Li Chen could place 80 soldiers inside. He immediately transferred the 19 big goblins he had into the castle, freeing up his forces, and then ran to the goblins working the land, catching one and asking if he wanted to join his army. After receiving consent, he directly paid them dinars and transferred them all to the castle garrison. After several trips back and forth, Li Chen filled the 80 slots, spending 400 dinars, leaving him with 5,640 dinars remaining. He couldn't take the troops stationed in the castle away. These people could only operate near the castle. Nevertheless, it transformed the chaotic and disorderly goblins into system soldiers who would absolutely obey his commands. This way, even if he wasn't in Goblin Fortress, these soldiers would maintain order in Goblin Fortress, preventing other goblins from causing trouble and stopping humans from escaping, thereby increasing the security of the castle. More importantly, the soldiers stationed in the castle received only half of their salary while there, and the castle could also collect taxes, offsetting the output and soldier salaries, resulting in almost no burden of dinars. Another benefit of the castle garrison was that they enjoyed training bonuses from the castle training grounds. In other words, by throwing goblins into the castle, regardless of what happened to them, they would gain experience every day, and in a month or two, they would all become big goblins, or even higher tier units than big goblins. Li Chen opened the castle building panel to check the existing buildings and those that could be constructed. The existing buildings were Level 1 barracks, which could provide 80 slots for castle Garrison, level 1 blacksmith with 2/20 personnel could choose to produce either 2 work axes, or 2 spears, or 2 daggers, or 2 hoes, or 2 sickles, or 1 combat sword each day. Level 1 lumberyard, with 1/20 personnel, level 2 farmland, which had a hydraulic irrigation system, increasing crop yield by 20%, level 1 walls, and 1 vacant building slot. The options for construction included training camp, which would provide a bit of experience to the garrison daily, warehouse, which would increase the castle's resource cap, prison, which could hold more captives and reduce the chance of escape, moat, a defensive structure surrounding the walls. Because you have a paper-making talent under your command, you can build a paper mill. Because you have a brewing talent under your command, you can build a brewery. Because you have a textile talent under your command, you can build a textile factory. After scanning through the uses of these buildings, Li Chen placed the training camp in the vacant slot. This thing could increase the experience points of the defenders, and the sooner it was arranged, the better. He clicked confirm and assigned the 80 defenders as laborers. Li Chen's vision suddenly shifted, and he found himself looking down from the sky, experiencing a god's eye view. Li Chen was somewhat surprised. He saw the castle, the walls, the fields, and the water wheel. In the center of his view, there was a green square labeled training camp. After some exploration, Li Chen discovered he could drag this square with his mind, somewhat similar to an RTS game. He found a relatively flat area in the forest and placed the training camp there. The 80 goblins he had recruited as defenders picked up their tools and began to chop and dig in that forest, with a message appearing in the upper left corner. Construction time 48 days. Li Chen thought to himself that this thing was incredibly useful. With it, managing and constructing the castle would be much more convenient. After arranging the construction of the training camp, he could also plan for the second sequence of buildings. Once the training camp was completed, the defenders would construct the second sequence of buildings. Li Chen looked around at the buildings he could construct but did not choose immediately. Instead, he went to his attributes page and opened the engineering skills. After completing the construction of 4 arrow towers, his engineering skill proficiency reached 25 points, unlocking a 241 skill. The options for the 241 skill were as follows. 1. Coal mine, unlocks the coal mine building, construction time 32 days, allowing you to produce coal with very high efficiency. 2. Lime kiln, construction time 35 days, allowing you to produce lime with very high efficiency, can only be placed on limestone mines. Li Chen chose the lime kiln as it was an excellent tool for production and development, useful for both paving roads and building houses. He clicked confirm and returned to the castle building page, where the lime kiln had entered the selection construction page. Li Chen immediately clicked on the lime kiln as the second sequence building. His perspective returned to the view of God, and he could drag the lime kiln with his consciousness to choose a placement location. However, no matter where he dragged the lime kiln, it was marked in red, and the system indicated it could not be placed as no limestone mine was found. What to do? Li Chen scratched his head and suddenly saw an option to automatically find a suitable building location. Without hesitation, he clicked on it. In the next moment, his perspective quickly moved north, arriving at the edge of a large mountain, where the lime kiln displayed green and could be placed. This mountain was about 1 kilometer away from Goblin Fortress, and he could see it from the walls of Goblin Fortress, so it seemed limestone could be mined there, allowing the lime kiln to be placed. He clicked confirm, and now he just had to wait for the progress bar. Li Chen successively clicked on the textile factory, paper mill, and brewery. They would be built in sequence. One advantage of buildings constructed by the system was that in reality, people could enter these workshops to produce resources, and in the system, these buildings would also produce resources which would then be stored in the system warehouse. Just like when he killed the horned crocodile, in reality, he could skin a horned crocodile from its corpse, and the battle settlement system would also drop a horned crocodile skin. This was equivalent to a factory with double production capacity. In short, it was quite delightful. Li Chen looked at the blacksmith shop. Currently, there were only 2 people working there, and the daily output was too low, with a maximum capacity of 20 people that needed to be filled. However, after clicking to recruit for the blacksmith shop, there was nothing in the recruitment basket, and the system popped up a prompt: your territory has no suitable blacksmiths. Li Chen thought for a moment, then took Miss Hannah to the blacksmith shop, found the blacksmith father and son, and handed them 20 goblins. Li Chen smiled at the 2 of them and said, from today on, these 20 goblins are under your care. You must teach them the knowledge of blacksmithing well. The blacksmith father and son looked at the group of drooling, finger-chewing goblins, and their expressions immediately turned bitter. The old man named Tai Oak suddenly knelt down. My lord, it's not that I want to shirk responsibility, but blacksmithing is a technical skill, even ordinary people find it difficult to learn, not to mention we can't communicate. Miss Hannah translated, and Li Chen waved his hand. Language barrier is not a problem, you can teach them by doing and gesturing. Don't underestimate my beloved friends. As long as you spark their interest, their desire to learn is quite strong. As he spoke, Li Chen drew the sword from his waist and waved it in front of a goblin who was sniffling, chewing on its fingers, and had a face full of wisdom. Do you want this? The goblin stopped chewing its fingers, staring at the shimmering sword with sparkling eyes. I want it. Li Chen gave it a big slap and pushed it in front of the blacksmith father and son. If you want it, learn blacksmithing from these two humans, and once you master it, you can forge your own swords. I will also improve your treatment so you can eat well without having to fight. On the battlefield, the 20 goblins immediately looked at the blacksmith father and son with eager eyes, surrounding them and chattering in goblin language, urging the two to teach them blacksmithing. Miss Hannah translated Li Chen's words to the blacksmith father and son, and they could only agree, mainly because they felt that if they refused again, Li Chen's patience would run out and they would be in trouble. Seeing that the two agreed, Li Chen stepped forward and patted their shoulders. Very good, I am very satisfied with your attitude. Remember, attitude is very important. Whether you can do it is one thing, having the right attitude is another. Show me your attitude. After saying that, Li Chen left, leaving behind 20 green goblins. The blacksmith father and son looked at these chattering creatures, feeling helpless. The blacksmith's son said, Dad, do you think these goblins can really learn blacksmithing? What if the big goblin comes to trouble us if they can't learn? The blacksmith father also felt helpless, but the order had been given. What else could they do? In short, let's teach first. Didn't the leader say he wanted to see our attitude? Then let's show our attitude. Anyway, we are teaching seriously. And if they can't learn, there's nothing we can do. Saying this, he lit the furnace and melted down a dozen swords and the full armor of Knight Leo. Right now, Goblin Fortress is in a developmental stage. Swords, being specialized combat tools, are too extravagant and unnecessary. Axes, on the other hand, can be used for both combat and production. As for that full set of Western armor, Li Chen tried to wear it but couldn't. Full armor is custom-made, only suitable for Knight Leo himself. It was useless to keep it, so it had to be melted down. However, he kept the large sword as his main weapon. After leaving the blacksmith's shop, Li Chen took Miss Hannah to find a carpenter, who also arranged for him to have 20 goblin apprentices. Next, he went to the land outside the castle and found some old farmers working the fields, assigning 3 goblins to each farmer. These goblins were to learn about farming crops from them, but they were also there to keep an eye on these guys. Anyone who dared to run away would be killed by the goblins. After finishing today's tasks, Li Chen stretched and glanced at Miss Hannah, who was lingering a few meters away. Within 3 meters, Li Chen shouted, causing Miss Hannah to shiver and reluctantly walk over to him. Li Chen scrutinized the woman with admiration. Hannah was beautiful, tall and slender, with long red hair that was incredibly charming. She was the perfect fit for a heroine from another world. Aside from being a goblin, the only looks she received from others were filled with disgust and fear, which was not too bad. Li Chen had heard online that the feet of a certain type of liquor were fragrant and wouldn't produce a foul smell, and even if they did, it would be a pink one. With a certain type of liquor right in front of him, Li Chen's curiosity was through the roof. Kak. He let out a strange laugh, sending chills down Miss Hannah's spine. Elbow, come inside with me. Li Chen unceremoniously grabbed Miss Hannah's hand and pulled her into a wooden house. It was almost the 30th chapter. As a goblin, he should be doing what goblins do, or else the readers would lose interest. Miss Hannah's face was filled with terror. Is it coming? Is it finally happening? She felt despair. Was she really going to discuss a 200 million deal with that damned goblin? Li Chen closed the wooden door, rubbing his hands together, making a sound like kekekek, just like Tom Cat when he was about to do something bad. Today, he was going to investigate whether the feet of a magical girl smelled bad and if they would produce a pink foul smell. He leaned in close to Miss Hannah and sniffed carefully. Miss Hannah's face was full of despair, but she did not resist. She just tightly shut her eyes. She knew that resisting was futile. It was better to comply and let things end sooner. Young Master Lance was right. As long as she could live, it was better than anything else. However, after Li Chen caught a whiff of her scent, his whole body froze. With her eyes closed, Miss Hannah was somewhat confused. She opened her eyes a crack, wondering what was going on. Did this need to brew for so long? Wasn't he supposed to pounce immediately? Li Chen was shocked, looking at Miss Hannah's deeply affected expression. Miss Hannah was also bewildered. What kind of expression was that? Not sure. Let me smell again. Li Chen muttered to himself, raising one of Miss Hannah's hands high and then sniffing her armpit. Ugh, so stinky. Li Chen roared, jumping back 3 meters. Fuck. How can a certain type of liquor smell bad? Miss Hannah was completely stunned. What kind of reaction was that? She instinctively raised her hand to sniff her armpit, and the strong odor made her gasp, quickly putting her hand down and turning her head away, her face turning crimson. Li Chen pressed against the wall in terror. Ever since he became a goblin, his sense of smell had become quite exceptional. Miss Hannah was wearing a thickly wrapped mage robe made of leather mixed with coarse fabric, and on her feet were tightly sealed knee-high leather boots. In short, everything was well sealed, locking in all odors. As he leaned in to take a whiff, a violent stench hit him. Sweat and leather fermented together, invading his nostrils and instantly destroying half of his olfactory cells, making him vomit on the spot. He recalled the times he went drinking with friends who worked on construction sites where the dorms were filled with freshly changed socks and clothes. The smell of sweat-soaked clothes after a long day of work was eerily similar to the odor coming from Miss Hannah. Damn it! Who said that Maho Xiaojio was fragrant? I'd kill him. Li Chen cursed inwardly, then pressed against the wall, avoiding Miss Hannah as she moved toward the door. He quickly opened the door and slipped outside, awkwardly saying to Miss Hannah, "Auntie, let's talk about this tomorrow. In any case, you should go wash yourself first." Bang! The door slammed shut. Miss Hannah's face turned from slightly red to cherry bomb red, steam practically bursting from her head as if she was about to explode. Aha! She let out a scream filled with shame and anger. How could she be deemed smelly by a goblin? How infuriating! What could she do? After being trapped in the city for a month, there was no water left in the castle. The water she conjured daily was given to everyone else to drink. Where would she find water to clean herself? Even for a girl, not bathing for over a month would make anyone smell bad. Damn it. All girls are like that, damn it. The next day, before dawn, Li Chen stood on the walls of Goblin Castle, inhaling deeply and tightening his abdomen, shouting loudly into the city. Within 3 steps, his voice echoed, causing many people to push open their doors and windows to check. These humans were still arranged by Li Chen to live in the castle, mainly for easier management. Once the city gates were closed, no one could leave, resembling a large prison. After shouting, Li Chen stood still, waiting. A few minutes later, a flustered Miss Hannah, with messy hair and disheveled clothing, rushed over. She had dark circles under her eyes, clearly having not slept well, summoned by Li Chen before dawn, which made her irritable. Miss Hannah stood in front of Li Chen, hurriedly trying to fix her messy hair. Li Chen stared at her. After being called smelly yesterday, this Maho Xiaojio had clearly cleaned herself thoroughly. Even her maid's robe and shoes were tidied up, making her look quite radiant. He. Li Chen chuckled creepily as he leaned closer, circling around to stand behind Miss Hannah, placing a hand on her shoulder. Miss Hannah stiffened. Was he really going to do that today? She shouldn't have let her anger prevent her from cleaning up. The foul smell was indeed her protection. As she was lost in thought, Li Chen leaned in closer to her ear. Miss Hannah. His warm breath on her ear sent shivers down her spine. Teach me magic. Ha! I won't yield, you know? What are you saying? Li Chen shrugged. I said teach me magic, Miss Hannah. Why is your face so red? Are you thinking of something strange? Miss Hannah was at a loss. Was there really such a development? Looking at Miss Hannah's bewildered face, Li Chen felt helpless. This Maho Xiaojio was very beautiful, and he was quite taken with her, but the problem was he was a goblin. Goblins give birth to offspring that are emotionless monsters. Li Chen couldn't bear to think about it. If he had children, they would be bloodthirsty monsters, unable to communicate, unable to share feelings, unable to look forward to the future together. They would occasionally stare at their own offspring with a sinister gaze, waiting for them to grow stronger and usurp their position. What use would such children be? To annoy him? Fortunately, Li Chen has a mounted combat system where one can marry in the context of horseback riding and slashing, specifically by marrying a female lord. After marriage, the children born will have a fixed affection level of 100 towards their father, which will not decrease. Once they reach adulthood, they can become upgradable NPCs and join the player's army. Players can assign their children to manage towns or let them lead their own troops. In other words, children born through system certification are normal humans, allowing Li Chen to enjoy all the joys of fatherhood. Therefore, his partner can only be a female lord. Miss Hannah is certified as an NPC by the system, but she cannot be recruited for now due to insufficient affection, making her unable to become a system-certified female lord. So, it's a no-go here. This is a tomato. After all, writing nonsense could land you in the little black room. Miss Hannah confirmed that Li Chen would not do anything to her, thinking to herself that she was just scaring herself, and then began to explain what magic is. Magic is a magical factor that dissipates into the air. To use it, one needs to use magical script to draw upon the magical power stored in the body, and then arrange the magical script in a certain pattern to export the magic as needed. To learn magic, you must first learn the common language of humans, then the ancient Elvish language, and finally the magical script. Li Chen asked, why can't I learn the magical script directly? Miss Hannah looked at Li Chen as if he were an idiot. The common language of humans is a subordinate language to the ancient Elvish language, which in turn is a subordinate language to the magical script. It is said that the magical script is the writing used by the gods, with each character containing the laws of the world's operation. To grasp its subtleties, one must have a deep understanding of the languages of various races. Learning from a lower-level language to a higher-level language is much simpler. Learning the magical script directly is like trying to build a tall building without a foundation. It won't get far. This explanation was quite clear, and Li Chen nodded. Then Miss Hannah, please teach me the human language first, then the ancient Elvish language, and finally the magical script. Miss Hannah looked Li Chen up and down. You learn the common language of humans? Li Chen confidently nodded. Yes, I will learn the common language of humans. Even if it's not for learning magic, I need to learn the human language to manage you slaves more conveniently. Miss Hannah trembled with anger at this remark and could only huff in response. She thought to herself that this goblin was thinking too simply. The language differences between different races are vast, and the Physiological and living conditions of different beings vary, leading to the development of different languages. It's not as simple as learning English in later generations. To learn a race's language, one must find ways to understand that race, which is fraught with difficulties. Li Chen was not worried about this. He could allocate points to his intelligence attribute and enhance his magical skill specialization. With these advantages, learning the languages of foreign races wouldn't be difficult. Li Chen took Miss Hannah around the territory, asking how to say anything interesting he saw in the common language of humans. Miss Hannah was somewhat taken aback by his attitude towards learning. This goblin really wanted to learn the common language of humans. She couldn't help but ask, "There are many types of magic. What kind do you want to learn?" Li Chen asked, "Is there any wood magic that can increase crop yields? Or earth magic that can facilitate digging ditches and manipulate stones to directly create livable housing? Or fire magic that can continuously generate heat, melt iron, and boil water?" Miss Hannah was taken aback, wondering what this goblin was talking about. How could sacred magic be used for such farmer tasks? Do you not want to learn powerful spells like Fireball, Lightning Blade, mind-bending illusions that create hallucinations wielding the authority of the gods, or spells that change the weather? Li Chen's eyes lit up. Magic can change the weather? Then can't mages artificially induce rain to increase crop yields? Miss Hannah let out a sigh. You really learned magic just to do these trivial things? Li Chen also pressed on. How could matters concerning the development of people's livelihoods be trivial? He fixed a serious gaze on Miss Hannah, scrutinizing her from head to toe. Miss Hannah was dressed very elegantly. Even now as a slave, there was an unshakable pride on her face, a quality cultivated over years in a certain environment, much like a university student who has never entered society from their ivory tower. Observing her fully, Li Chen suspected that wizards were granted a high social status in the human world, and people learned magic not for practical applications but to elevate their own social standing. It was similar to the imperial examination, not for research or understanding the world, but to become officials. The two of them exchanged glances, each secretly looking down on the other. Li Chen was determined to learn the common language of humans, and for a long time afterward he kept Miss Hannah by his side, forcing himself to communicate with her in his halting human tongue. To be honest, learning a foreign language was indeed a painful endeavor, so tedious that it drove Li Chen to madness. Those who proclaimed their love for learning were practically anti-goblin elements. Yet, Li Chen still overcame his aversion to studying and devoted himself to learning. Ever since capturing Goblin Fortress, he felt an inexplicable sense of urgency, as if some dangerous thing was slowly approaching. If he couldn't seize the time to grow stronger, when danger arrived, he would only end up as fish on the chopping block. Therefore, whether it was territory production and construction, military training, or improving his own qualities, he was doing everything he could to become stronger. Miss Hannah was quite shocked by Li Chen's attitude. She could see that he was very averse to learning the human common language, yet he endured it, forcing himself to study. What could possibly drive this goblin to go against his biological instincts? Time flew by, and half a month later, another wave of goblin pups was born, bringing the number of goblins in Goblin Fortress to 800. Li Chen felt the pressure of food supplies and ordered a halt to breeding activities. It was time to stop the population increase and let things settle for a while. Fortunately, in the past half month, more and more land had been cultivated, and after planting potatoes on all this land, they would soon be able to fill the granaries, at which point they could increase the population again. During this time, humans and goblins coexisted peacefully, and humans were surprised to find that the goblins did not eat humans as rumored, nor did they harass human women. They showed remarkable restraint towards humans. Those who lacked restraint were ordered to be killed by Li Chen. Their bodies hung in the forest as a warning to the new generation of goblins with questionable judgment. In short, the conflict between the two races in Goblin Fortress was not so sharp. There would be no breakthroughs in development here for the time being. Li Chen planned to take some people back to the original tribe. He wanted to bring some human farmers and crops to develop along two lines. One shouldn't put all their eggs in one basket. If Goblin Fortress were to suffer an attack from humans or monsters leading to its destruction, at least the goblin tribe could continue to develop. Li Chen took 20 adult goblins, 300 new generation goblins, 20 human farmers, the father of the blacksmiths, Knight Leo, and all the human soldiers, Steward Raymond, young Master Lance, Miss Hannah, various vegetable seeds, and 100 sets of farming tools. One could say he brought all the threatening individuals with him, leaving behind only some indecisive human farmers. Before the troops set off, Li Chen called Gobu over. "Gobu, I need you to stay and help me manage Goblin Fortress. We need a big goblin stationed here to keep the new generation of goblins in check." Gobu was completely stunned. Why wasn't he being taken along? "Boss, I can't do it. I'm afraid it will cause trouble. Take me away." Li Chen patted Gobu's shoulder encouragingly. "Gobu, don't hesitate. This is an order. Don't worry, the 80 goblins I left in the castle will listen to you. If humans try to escape, catch them and kill them directly. If the new generation of goblins causes trouble, catch 3 and kill 1. With these 2 measures, Gobu Castle will definitely be secure. You don't have to do anything in the castle, just cultivate the land according to my plan. When you have free time, train the new generation of goblins. If they don't listen, kill them. If you kill too many, let the wood rats breed. In short, just keep an eye on the castle. It won't be long before I come back, and when I do, it will count as your military merit. 100 pieces of jerky. After saying this, Li Chen left. With 80 system soldiers stationed in over 800 new generation goblins, there would be no danger unless 200 human soldiers came. As the troops marched, Miss Hannah kept looking back, feeling that she was going to the demon cave with Li Chen, and she was also worried about the human women in the castle encountering misfortune. Seeing her like this, Li Chen laughed heartily and comforted her. Don't worry, the human women are all professional textile workers. They are my high-value assets, I won't let them get hurt. Miss Hannah was still worried. After you leave, will your people still obey your orders? Li Chen assured her, as long as the humans don't run away, my people will definitely not harm them. The troops marched through the wilderness until it was slightly dark. Li Chen ordered to set up a pot and cook. The goblins began to boil water in a ceramic pot and then cook jerky and vegetables. Within 3 meters, Li Chen shouted, and Miss Hannah angrily came to his side. Can you call me by my name? I am not within 3 meters. Li Chen ignored her and pointed at a ceramic pot with fresh crocodile meat and vegetables. Cook? Miss Hannah was taken aback. You want me to cook? Li Chen nodded seriously. Hurry up, eat, well and sleep. We need to set off before dawn tomorrow. Previously, Li Chen had always cooked for himself, mainly because he was afraid the goblins wouldn't pay attention to hygiene. Now that Miss Hannah was here, it was natural to let her cook. Miss Hannah quickly finished cooking, and after the two of them ate with ceramic bowls and chopsticks, Li Chen spread a piece of rag on the ground and directly fell asleep by the campfire. Miss Hannah curled up in a corner, sleeping uneasily. It was unclear how long she slept, but in a daze, she heard a voice by her ear. Within 3 meters, Miss Hannah suddenly opened her eyes, and Li Chen's green face was right in front of her, almost making her scream. Li Chen quickly covered her mouth. Don't shout. No shouting. Miss Hannah's face was filled with terror. Li Chen held her mouth for a while and then loosened it a bit. Don't shout, I'll let go, understand? Miss Hannah nodded, and Li Chen released his hand. Follow me. He carried a large sword, the weapon of Knight Leo, an absurdly heavy two-handed sword weighing 8 kilograms. Li Chen led the way, and Miss Hannah followed. Where are you taking me? Li Chen replied casually, to check the posts. The two quietly circled to the edge of the temporary camp. Li Chen had set up 4 watch posts at the corners of the camp, wanting to see if the goblins would obey his orders and stand guard carefully. However, he was disappointed. At the first post, 2 goblins were lying on the ground, sound asleep. Li Chen was furious, rushing over and slapping each of them awake. Damn it! You two are asking for death. Everyone, gather! Li Chen roared, waking all the goblins in the temporary camp. They gathered around Li Chen with their weapons, thinking that enemies were attacking. Seeing everyone had arrived, Li Chen spat on the ground and pointed at the 2 bewildered sentinels. These 2 were sleeping on duty. If enemies come, we will be caught off guard. You 2 have violated military discipline, and I sentence you to death. Li Chen swung his great sword twice, beheading the 2 culprits. He stood there with the bloodied sword, pointing at the goblins. Military discipline, I have repeated it countless times. You can choose to ignore it, but if I catch you, this will be your fate. Steward Mangda and Knight Leo stood together, and Knight Leo sighed. He really is different. Steward Mangda looked astonished. You can't even understand goblin language. Do you know what they are doing? Hey, isn't it obvious? Knight Leo pointed at the headless goblin on the ground. 2 sentinels sleeping on duty, caught and executed on the spot. I'm familiar with this. When I was under Master Lance's father, I often caught lazy soldiers on night watch. But this is too ruthless. We would just give a couple of military canes to lazy soldiers, but he killed them directly. TSK, TSK, TSK. Steward Mengda watched Li Chen roaring and howling, feeling very uneasy. This goblin displayed various traits that made him feel the other party would become a great disaster. The troops had been marching for 2 days at a very slow pace, mainly because the humans in the troop had too many issues. Their endurance for long marches was extremely poor, and they often needed to stop and rest, becoming easily ill. The mosquitoes in the rainforest were a piece of cake for goblins. Being bitten only caused some itching, but for humans, it could be deadly. On the 2nd day of marching, a human fell seriously ill due to poisonous insects, and Miss Hannah could only stay by his side, casting low-level healing spells to help him. The rainforest was humid at night, and Li Chen's troop had very few camping supplies. The goblins lay directly on the ground to sleep, but the humans couldn't stand it. They lay on the ground and woke up the next day with sore backs and stomachs, all due to the dampness. Li Chen didn't want these high-ranking talents to have problems, so he ordered a slowdown in the marching speed, creating simple wooden beds for them. At night, they placed the wooden beds next to the campfire, so at least, while sleeping, they wouldn't be in contact with the ground. The troop dragged on for 3 days. If it were a pure goblin troop, they would have reached the tribe long ago, but now, Li Chen estimated, they had covered less than half the distance. However, this morning, after crossing a mountain, Li Chen suddenly caught a familiar goblin scent in the wind, and there were many of them. He wondered, they Hadn't reached the tribe yet. How could he still smell goblins? Could it be that the tribe's hunting team had come this far? But that seemed too far, even for hunting. It wouldn't be possible to run this far, right? Li Chen couldn't figure it out and led the troops cautiously forward. When they pushed through the bushes, they arrived at a relatively open area. There were less than 100 goblins here. Many of them injured, lying, or crouching with dejected expressions, as if they had suffered a significant blow. Li Chen recognized the leader among this group of goblins at a glance. One ear. What are you doing here? Upon seeing Li Chen and the many well-equipped goblins behind him, One Ear burst into tears. He hurriedly ran to Li Chen and knelt down, hugging his thigh. Boss, woo. Our home is gone. Li Chen's heart sank and he quickly lifted the guy up. What happened? Tell me in detail. Woo. Boss. Dog-headed people. It was the dog-headed people who attacked us. During the time Li Chen was away, One Ear had cultivated land to plant potatoes as he requested and increased the number of goblins, at one point raising the tribe's population to 500, which was quite an achievement. However, while he was steadily developing, the dog-headed tribe to the east suddenly launched an attack. Originally, the goblins and the dog-headed people were roughly equal in strength, and they had coexisted peacefully for a long time. However, the dog-headed people somehow managed to gather a group of ogres. These giants, standing 5 to 6 meters tall, with low intelligence and tough skin, inexplicably obeyed the dog-headed people's commands and helped attack the goblin tribe, which was utterly destroyed. One goblin, named E'er, fled westward with the few remaining goblins, aiming to catch up with Li Chen and inform him of the theft of their home. Li Chen stroked his chin. He didn't feel much regret about losing his old home. He hadn't left any precious assets in the tribe, so it was just a loss. Anyway, he planned to return to rebuild. However, with the dog-headed people attacking, whether for revenge or for safety reasons, they had to be eliminated. Li Chen asked, how many dog-headed people are there? And how many ogres? E'er scratched his head and extended his fingers. The number of ogres is just as many as the fingers on one hand, and there are slightly more dog-headed people than our tribe had before. 5 ogres and 300 to 400 dog-headed people, huh? Li Chen turned to look at the troops he had brought, which included 19 big goblins, each equipped with crocodile leather armor, axes, crossbows, and a wooden shield. After 2 months of military training, the elite goblins, honed through 5 rounds of 3 draws and 1 kill, numbered 300, equipped with 52 2-meter-long iron spears and wooden shields. The remaining personnel were all armed with sickles, axes, and hoes, which could be fitted with long poles to become pole weapons. This heavily armed force would indeed cut through the dog-headed people like chopping vegetables. But what to do about the ogres, such giant units? Li Chen thought for a moment and shouted, within 3 steps. Miss Hannah appeared beside Li Chen with a stern expression. Ignoring her demeanor, Li Chen asked, do you know about ogres? Miss Hannah nodded. Tell me everything you know about ogres. Miss Hannah didn't understand why Li Chen was asking this but answered truthfully. Ogres are creatures with a very large appetite and low intelligence. Adult ogres stand 5 to 6 meters tall and have a lifespan of 300 to 400 years, with a natural affinity for earth-type magic. Their skin is very thick, and ogres develop stone-like horns as they age, becoming harder the older they get. Ogres also possess strong regenerative abilities. They can regrow severed limbs. They have high physical and magical resistance, are omnivorous, have a massive appetite, and possess a strong sense of family, often living in groups of parents, children, and grandchildren, usually forming a family of 5 to 7 members. Li Chen took a deep breath. Damn, magical resistance, giants, and super strength. How was he supposed to deal with that? Don't ogres have any weaknesses? If ogres had no exploitable weaknesses, Li Chen would have to consider retreating. It wasn't worth it to engage in a futile struggle. He might as well find another place to develop. Miss Hannah shrugged. If we talk about ogres' weaknesses, it would be their low intelligence and slow movement. Oh, right, their family concept is also a weakness. Some wizards, in order to obtain magical materials, will capture ogre cubs when adult ogres go hunting, then threaten the entire ogre family, luring them into a pit to drown them, thus acquiring a large amount of earth-type magical materials. Wow! Li Chen gasped. Are human wizards really that ruthless? He instinctively took 2 steps back, looking at Miss Hannah with a different expression. Miss Hannah was taken aback and quickly explained, hey, what kind of look is that? I'm just a wizard apprentice. I haven't done anything like that. Li Chen coughed without responding. Capturing the small ogre was definitely not an option. He suspected that the small ogre had already been controlled by the dog-headed people. Otherwise, how could they drive the entire ogre family to do their bidding? So, he could only rely on brute strength to charge in. The ogres had high physical and magical defenses, and the weapons in his hands could hardly break through their defenses. However, an idea flashed through Li Chen's mind about a crossbow. If he used iron-tipped arrows, it should be able to inflict damage on the ogres, right? He called over Tyok and described the crossbow he wanted to create. In his previous life, Li Chen had seen a documentary featuring a simple Roman crossbow, made entirely of wood except for the string. This device had 2 wheels on either side, and it only required 2 soldiers to turn the wheels to gradually tighten the string, making it a simple yet practical crossbow. Li Chen communicated with Tai Oak for about half an hour and finally deemed it feasible. He instructed the goblins to chop down trees, and the two of them used small knives and axes to carefully process the relatively intricate gear components. With everyone's cooperation, the first crossbow was completed after 4 hours. This crossbow measured 1.8 meters in length and 1.3 meters in width, requiring 8 people to carry it. For the bowstring, Li Chen used 5 crocodile tendons, weaving them together like a braided rope. When tightened, it could provide tremendous kinetic energy. As for the ammunition, they simply needed to carve a suitably sized wooden stick and insert an iron spearhead at the front. Li Chen sent 2 big goblins to operate the winding mechanism, and it took them 2 minutes to complete the loading, which meant that after encountering the enemy, they would likely have only one chance to shoot. However, all of this was worth it. Li Chen aimed the loaded crossbow at a tree that 4 people could embrace and pulled the trigger. With a whoosh, the thick crossbow bolt was shot out, and as wood chips flew, the entire iron spearhead penetrated the tree, losing all kinetic energy only when the bolt snapped and got stuck in the tree. The terrifying power made everyone gasp in awe, and Li Chen smirked. Wasn't this a sure thing? The explosive kinetic energy of the crossbow at close range was probably greater than that of a small caliber pistol, which should be enough to deal with the ogres. Li Chen immediately ordered everyone to work through the night to produce 5 more of these crossbows. By the time dawn broke the next day, the 5 crossbows were completed and functioned well after test firing. With the deadly weapons ready, Li Chen ordered the army to set off towards the tribe. Because they had to carry the crossbows, the army's speed slowed down a bit, and after 2 days of marching, Li Chen finally arrived at the familiar forest. Here, he smelled a very strong scent of beasts. It was unmistakably left by the dog-headed people during their activities. These guys had completely taken over the goblins' hunting grounds, considering themselves the masters of this forest. Li Chen snorted coldly. He would make these dog-headed people pay the price. Looking at the dense jungle, he felt it necessary to find a suitable battlefield, one with an open view and no trees obstructing the line of fire. One goblin suggested, "Boss, we can go near the cave spiders, where I found the potatoes. The ground there is covered with potato roots, and there are no big trees blocking the view." Li Chen readily agreed and led the troops to the area near the cave spiders. Upon arrival, he found that this location was indeed suitable for crossbow attacks. In the distance, there was a tall mountain, bare and covered in black-gray stones, with many caves where large spiders could be seen moving about. Additionally, the surrounding mountains had no large trees, and the ground was filled with potato roots. For some reason, the potatoes were thriving here. Li Chen chose a small hillside and had the crossbows set up there, aimed directly at the forest. Once the enemy emerged from the forest, they would be about 500 meters away from the crossbow position, providing a wide field of fire. Li Chen had some potato roots chopped up and laid them on the crossbows, then instructed the other goblins to crawl into the potato vines to conceal themselves. He pushed far into the forest to look at the crossbow position, which was well concealed, showing no signs. Everything was ready, and Li Chen said to One Ear, "Take your men to attack the dog-headed people in the tribe and see if you can lure them over." One Ear's eyes widened, fear flashing in them. Without waiting for him to speak, Li Chen continued, "Don't be afraid, it's not like I'm sending you to fight, just lure the enemies over. The dog-headed people must have a very keen sense of smell, and they definitely remember your scent. Just pretend to approach the tribe, throw a few stones to provoke them, and let them chase you." This, One Ear was still scared. Indeed, the dog-headed people's sense of smell was exceptional. When One Ear led the goblins out of the tribe before, there were 200 of them, but the dog-headed people, relying on their acute sense of smell, chased them down to less than 100. If it weren't for One Ear's resilience and their ability to run far enough, the dog-headed people would have chased them to death, fearing they would run into the territory of powerful beasts. Seeing this guy still hesitating, Li Chen got annoyed and drew the great sword from his back, pressing it against his neck. "I'm not bargaining with you. Go execute the mission right now, or your head will roll." One Ear, quick-witted, suddenly remembered that the boss was not someone to mess with, often resorting to a 3-strike execution, euphemistically called purifying the team. One Ear hurriedly promised to carry out the task, and Li Chen sheathed his sword, patting him on the shoulder. "Don't worry, you won't be shortchanged. If you succeed, I'll count it as military merit, give you 100 pieces of jerky, and even 2 wooden mice as wives." Upon hearing he could have his own exclusive wooden mice, One Ear became excited, his fear dissipating. "Boss, I guarantee I'll complete the mission." One Ear ran into the forest with his subordinates, while Li Chen lay back in the potato vines, waiting patiently. He was curious and scratched the dark soil beneath him, wondering why it was so black. Hiding behind, Iron Ore clutched a piece of black stone, noticing colorful spots on it, his expression changing. Time passed second by second, and Li Chen, chewing on a blade of grass, felt somewhat idle. After waiting for half an hour, a commotion came from the direction of the forest. Li Chen spat out the grass and shouted, "The enemy is coming, everyone get down." One Ear rushed out of the forest with his men, looking very flustered. He ran into the potato vines, reaching the spot where Li Chen was lying, completely exhausted. "Boss, I completed the mission. All the dog-headed people in the tribe have been lured over. Li Chen glanced at the forest's edge. There's nothing there? Boss, those dog-headed people are waiting for the ogre. That big guy moves slowly. Oh, right, boss, there's only one ogre and the number of dog-headed people has decreased a lot. Li Chen was taken aback and asked for details, but One Ear said he didn't know. Li Chen pondered for a moment, thinking it might be that after the dog-headed people's main force attacked the Goblin tribe, they returned to their original territory, leaving only a small number of dog-headed people and one ogre to control this hunting ground. This was a fortunate turn of events, making the situation favorable for him. If there were only a few dog-headed people and one ogre, wouldn't the 5 crossbows easily handle them? Li Chen felt his chances of winning had increased a bit and he immediately ordered One Ear, take your men forward 50 steps and line up. Ha! Li Chen slapped him. Hurry up and do as you're told. Oh! One Ear quickly led his subordinates forward 50 steps to form a line. At that moment, the dog-headed people chasing them also arrived, and the leading ogre, towering at 5 meters, pushed aside 2 small trees, holding a massive wooden stake in his hand. This huge creature resembled a mountain of flesh, its skin cracked and rough like parched earth, appearing very tough. Surrounding it were about 100 goblins, some completely naked while others wore scraps of animal hides. They wielded stone weapons, looking like a disorganized mob of mercenaries. However, they had at least entered the Stone Age, and with the